Hey everyone, this is What If Fan bringing you another part of What If Transmigrated as Harry Potter. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name in the description below. Please make sure to support the creator. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 31, An Immortal Witch. Lucius traced his fingers over the wrist of his wand arm. The lines left by the unbreakable vow stood pronounced over his pale skin. With this mark, he realized he carried a mark on each of his arms. At least, he took the dark mark willingly. Perhaps he was ignorant of what he was stepping into at the time, but he had taken the Dark Lord's mark proudly. At the time, he thought the dark mark was a symbol of power. It took him years to realize it was only a mark of ownership. The Dark Lord marked his followers because the Dark Lord saw his followers as his property. The Dark Lord owned the life and fate of his Death Eaters. To a larger extent, the Dark Lord owned his followers and their families. He had witnessed the Dark Lord easily wipe out the families of those who displeased the man despite years of leal service. The Dark Lord only cared about power and obsessed over servitude too much. This was not what Lucius thought the Death Eaters were supposed to be. He thought he was fighting to reclaim his world from the pervasion of Muggle culture and radical ideas. He thought he was going to fight the Muggles and their Muggle-born offsprings who dared to steal the sacred magic from the world. How naive I was to think such nonsense. Lucius lamented as he pulled the sleeve of his left hand to see the strengthening dark mark. Lucius looked at the dark mark and then at the mark left by the unbreakable vow. Out of the two marks, he certainly feared the recent mark left by the vow. The dark mark has yet to be the death of him, but he feared rightly for his life as he took a dangerous vow. He had joined the Dark Lord out of loyalty but also because of his father, Abraxas Malfoy. His father was a powerful leader who had worked wonders from inside the ministry. The Dark Lord even held Abraxas Malfoy in great regard for unseating Nabi Leech, the first Muggle-born minister of magic. At that time, it was a huge blow to the pureblood cause for a Muggle-born to have taken the highest office in the Ministry of Magic. Leech was also a threat to the Dark Lord who had planned to unleash his campaign to take over the ministry. Who'd have thought this incident would draw the ire of another group whose goals are yet to be made clear? Lucius thought. Why the long face, Lucius? Shouldn't you be happy that your family is no longer under the threat of living in the streets? Lucius glared at Damian Greengrass, who sported a smug grin on his face. You've made a slave out of me with the vow. Should I be grateful for that, Greengrass? Lucius snarled. You should. If Potter had his way, you and your family will be left penniless and you'd be forced to serve a life sentence in Azkaban or worse, the Dementor's kiss. The boy has a vindictive streak which was a surprise to me. Nonetheless, he has been a very useful tool to bring you down. Greengrass boasted, which made Lucius all the more incensed. He could not accept the fact that he was brought low by a snot-nosed brat who was supposed to be Dumbledore's infallible stooge. Mr. Potter certainly has surprised all of us. But, we are not here to talk about Potter. It is you, Lucius, the man of the hour, who has taken my interest. A sickly sweet voice cooed which made Lucius flinch. He could feel the witch's presence behind. It was as if he was in the presence of the Dark Lord, but much more worse. He could feel the oppressive magic tightly coiled under the witch's control bearing down upon him. With the Dark Lord, the magic was always chaotic and looking to crush him underneath its weight. However, Lilith's magic had a suffocating effect, but it also looked to peel off his skin and get inside him rather than crush him with its power. If he felt small in the presence of the Dark Lord, now he felt like there was no purpose to his existence. The worst thing was that he has no idea just who this witch is. Not for a moment did he think Lilith was the true name of the witch. While he may not have extensive contacts in other European communities, he certainly had enough pull to know of any emerging dark wizards, especially one with this much wealth. You have been a terrible guest, Lucius. After all, where is the appreciation for saving you from a disastrous debt? Lucius kept his head down, afraid to attract the ire of the witch. I thank you, my lady. Lucius mumbled out his thanks. Truly, what else was he supposed to do other than swallow his pride and be a good servant for Lilith? The woman was dangerous, far more dangerous than the Dark Lord. At least, the Dark Lord was an unhinged ragaholic maniac. He could see what could trigger the Dark Lord's rage and act accordingly. But Lilith has now forced his obedience through the unbreakable vow. There was no room for ambiguity when it comes to dealing with Lilith. You know, I've imagined this moment for a long time. Your grandfather dealt my plans a heavy blow when he conspired and brought down Mr. Leech from his post. Did he tell you how he accomplished that, slave? Lucius gritted his teeth at the degrading way Lilith was addressing him, but there was nothing he could do. For all intents and purposes, he became a slave the moment he swore himself to Damian Greengrass. He did not, my lady, said Lucius, swallowing his pride for the sake of his continued existence. Well, I shall tell you. Your father, with the help of Lestrange's and Black's, spread lies that Minister Leech was a spy for Muggles. Of course, some foolish allegation alone was not going to unseat the new minister. Your father and his Death Eater friends assassinated Leech's family and allies. It was the prelude to Voldemort's rise, said Lilith, circling Lucius with a cruel glint entering her eyes. Uncle Benedict also lost his life because of the Dark Lord. Damian supplied his 2 cents. Ah, yes. Benedict was one of my favorite students. And I avenged him by wiping out the Malfoy blood from the rest of Europe. Lilith smirked coldly. Lucius' eyes widened in horror at the witch's claim. Also, how could Benedict Greengrass become the student of Lilith? The witch might be a madwoman, but she looked like she was in her early 30s. Why are you surprised, Lucius? You know of no witch who is a famous immortal? Lilith asked amusedly. His eyes widened in realization. You're. Suddenly Lucius felt his throat contract and pain started flaring up in his heart. The vow, he hastily remembered as pain flared up all over his body. He felt as if he was being torn apart all over. He was just about to keel over dead when suddenly the pain vanished and it was as if everything was just a figment of his imagination. Ah! Did you forget about the vow, Lucius? You are not allowed to mention me in any form or manner. You should keep that in mind always if you value your life, said Lilith, rolling her eyes uncaringly. Lucius was now truly scared. He was in the presence of one of the most powerful witches of all time. A witch that has immense wealth on her beck and call and also a confirmed immortal. The Flammels were dangerous, very dangerous, in fact that most of the wizarding world rightly feared them and went out of their way to not antagonize the couple. Many dark wizards and dark lords have tried their hand at killing off the Flammels for their wealth, knowledge, and influence. Yet, all have failed and fallen before the immortal couple. The most dangerous aspect of the Flammels is that no one clearly knows when the couple achieved immortality. The common belief is that they are nearly 700 years old, but this could not be verified as there is almost no hard evidence to support this information. Information provided by chocolate cards was not exactly a reliable source of information. All everyone agreed upon was that the Flammels are rich, immortal, and powerful sorcerers. Even the Dark Lord at his height of power never went after the Flammels. At least, he was not aware of any such attempts. The Dark Lord is known to be secretive on such matters. Keeping all this in mind, Lucius became keenly aware he was in trouble here. I beg you. Leave my family out of this. Whatever grudge you hold against my father, my wife and son had nothing to do with it. Even I don't know much about my father's doings. Lucius begged on his knees. He looked to Damian Greengrass for some form of sympathy and support which never came. Lucius was suddenly lifted off the ground by an unseen force and was pressed against the wall. His limbs flailed around helplessly, but he stopped as Lilith came closer to his vicinity. He gulped at the fiery glint of magical power in her green eyes. You cannot shirk the responsibilities, especially when you are the beneficiary of your father's actions. Because of you and a bunch of other idiots, my plans suffered a serious setback. You are going to fix it if you prefer to see your family alive and well. Lucius could do nothing else but nod, desperately hoping against hope to garner some goodwill for his family's sake. I'll do whatever you want, my lady. Whatever you want. He cried out in desperation as he felt the foreign magic coiling over the surface of his skin. For what, he did not know, and he was not looking forward to finding out. Thankfully, Lilith withdrew her magic, allowing Lucius room for breath. Good. I want you to be a fly on the wall, Lucius. When Voldemort rises, I shall help you to be of use to the Dark Lord. If you are a good boy and follow my instructions without fail, you and your family can lead a peaceful life. Lucius could hardly refuse an order, and it was an order. He either obeyed or he and his family die. So, he readily agreed and received his first set of instructions. Life as a slave started for Lucius from that moment. XXXXXXXX. It won't be long before Potter and Tonks realize Malfoy escaped their trap. They will investigate how Lucius slipped away. Damien commented, knowing well not to push his boundaries with Perenelle Flammel. Why, Damien? Are you afraid of Potter? Asked Perenelle, an amused tilt to her lips as she looked at her ally. You wanted the boy on your side, my lady. I'm afraid this won't give Potter a good first impression, said Damien. I doubt Mr. Potter will be too much bothered. If he is, then he has yet to rise to my expectations. This is no time to worry about teenage boys, Damien. I understand, my lady. It's just that. Damien trailed off. Ah. Perenelle nodded in understanding. You have finally found your Parselmouth to lift the curse. Damien nodded. The only sane one is, you know, my lady. There have been many Parseltongues over the years, but none sane or powerful enough to lift the blood curse. And are you sure? Asked Perenelle, turning away from Damien with a peculiar look gracing her face. My lady? Damien frowned. Are you sure Potter is the one? There have been many other Parselmouths. All of them were unstable or useless. Perenelle commented, her eyes trained on the fireplace where it continued to ebb away the wood. Potter is strong for his age. There is a certain finesse in his magic. But Shada was quite thorough in her observations about the boy. I see, she upsetly said while she stared into the fire, lost in thought. My lady, is something wrong? Are you perhaps not in favor of involving Mr. Potter any further? Asked Damien, troubled by the long silence of his patron. Nothing of that sort, Damien. I was just lost in thought, said Perenelle, shaking herself out of the stupor. Do as you like with Potter. She went back to staring at the fire. She wondered why she was suddenly overcome with a sense of concern. Perhaps she was losing her touch. She hadn't cared for her daughter, so why should she care for her grandson? After all, one who's born in fire will not wane under the sun's heat. If she is to acknowledge her grandson, then he'll have to prove his worth to her. Show me you can stand on your own with your shoulders back. Show me you have the power to bear the weight of this world, and show me the might of your magic. Show me that you are exceptional. Stand before me and face me as an equal on the strength you built. Then and only then shall I acknowledge you as my blood, Harry James Potter. Chapter 32, The Second Task P1. Harry carefully aligned the broom so that he was right underneath Fred just as the bludger came into the redhead's possession. As Fred was about to smash the bludger, Harry pulled the broom straight up. The Firebolt's advantage compared to the Nimbus models is that it has better acceleration in the first 30 seconds. There was no lurch on his body when he went for an abrupt flyby. The Firebolt carried him through and distracted Fred from concentrating on the bludger in favor of veering away. Instead of strictly playing the role of a seeker, Harry was asked to play interference all throughout the practice session. This was not something he was expected to do in the last 3 years owing to his small body frame. But now, Angelina was of the opinion that he was ready to play more aggressively next year as he was putting on some muscle and height. Harry was quite happy with the recent role. It means there is some noticeable improvement in his growth and physique. Madame Pomfrey was also satisfied with his development. Her potions did better than expected, and she credited that to his physical activity. The faster the potion-induced nutrients burn out, the better it is for the body. This is the only piece of good news this week, so he was going to hold on to it for the time being. The bad news, in contrast, was overwhelming. In the wake of Sirius' trial, the Ministry had launched an inquiry into Bartimus Crouch only to find the man was nowhere to be found. Once Harry learned that from Andromeda, he immediately used the Marauder's map, and Crouch Sr. was stuffed inside fake Moody's trunk along with the real Moody. At least, he assumed this was the case, as he inferred this from the Marauder's map, which showed Crouch Sr. and real Moody at the corner of fake Moody's quarters. Crouch Jr. must have feared his secret getting out if his father was caught by the Ministry. Hence, the Death Eater must have thought it is better to imprison his father for the time being. Since Harry was not about to jeopardize Voldemort's plan, he was also not willing to act against Crouch. For the time being, Crouch will have to be allowed to play Moody's role. The next bit of bad news was the most unacceptable one. After all the trouble he went through, Lucius Malfoy somehow managed to survive the day. The only consolation was that the man had to sell out everything. The Daily Prophet reports that Malfoy lost all his fortune, his lands, investments, the family manor, and even the last bottle of fire whiskey. The goblins also confirmed the story. All the funds as per the contract were paid in full, supposedly from a German account. And no matter how much he pressured, the goblins were not willing to divulge more on the matter. To make matters worse, Malfoy was also free of any prison time. Harry suspected bribes were in play, but he couldn't think of anyone that could bail out Malfoy with significant Death Eater leaning from Germany. Nonetheless, he was determined to find the source of Malfoy's support. As such, he requested Andromeda Tonks yesterday to keep her ears open for any bit of information. It was unlikely for the goblins to divulge anything, but you never know. Good game, Harry. A few more practice sessions and you'll be surprising the chasers and beaters next year, said Angelina as they grounded their brooms. Thanks. It's a shame we didn't have Quidditch matches this year. With Oliver gone, we really needed to hold tryouts for a new keeper, said Harry as he stepped out of the Quidditch gear. There is still time. We will find someone next year. After saying his goodbye, Harry was rushing toward Professor Babbling's quarters. On his way, he noticed Cedric Diggory snooping around the Black Lake. Harry was not so surprised by this turn of events. He was wondering when Cedric would figure it out, with Krum spending most of his time swimming in the Black Lake. Even Fleur Delacour had tried her hand, but her fans made her think otherwise. The French champion was barely able to get some privacy. It turns out she has more obsessive fans than even Krum. And the most obsessive one so far was Roger Davies. The seventh-year Ravenclaw has been pining after the French champion after the Yule Ball like a lost puppy. Harry was sure there must be an interesting reason behind that, but he neither had the time nor the patience to dip into the Hogwarts rumor mill. The second task was only a few days away, and he supposed this time it was going to be an even field. Cedric must have picked up on the second task by observing Krum, who was a regular visitor to the lake. It was not shocking for Harry this happened. He had guessed something like this would happen. It just means he'd have to finish the task faster than Cedric and keep the Hogwarts champion at a disadvantage in the third task. That should keep Cedric from any danger. Harry had only explored the Black Lake twice. Once he located the Merpeople village, he stopped further exploration and focused on the spells essential to complete the second task. Even this meeting with Professor Babbling was related to the second task. Of course, Hogwarts professors were not allowed to help out with the tasks, but there are loopholes that Harry was determined to exploit. Facing the large oak doors to Professor Babbling's quarters, he knocked twice and waited. The doors swung open, and this time when he stepped in, Harry sensed the detection runes around the entrance door, but he paid it no heed. With his magical aura stabilized by the ritual, Harry got a sense of foreign magic. In a castle full of versatile magic like Hogwarts, it was a bit difficult to walk a few meters without his senses getting triggered. The occlumency training was a big help in keeping his cool, but it was difficult to control some of his involuntary reactions. Mr. Potter. Come, take a seat. Professor Babbling welcomed him jovially, pointing to his usual seat. Ever since Harry had proved he was no slacker in class and was quite interested in more practical aspects of the runes, he was welcomed far more cordially by the Ancient Runes professor. While he was a beginner in ancient runes, all things considered, there was that unnatural intuition that makes Harry pick up on magic working in the background. Whatever the ASB did on his mind, it seems to have been filtering Voldemort's soul shard and injecting its knowledge, or at least impressions of magical knowledge, into his mind. There is no other sensible explanation. After all, how else could I've managed to come this far in ancient runes in such a short time? Harry thought, eyeing a set of parchments deriving a specific runic script improving upon the impervious charm. Or maybe, I'm a super genius or something when it comes to the practical use of magic. I've tweaked a small part of the block scripts for better results, but overall your work was phenomenal, Mr. Potter. Professor Babbling complimented him. Thank you, Professor, said Harry, as he reviewed the changes Professor Babbling made to his runic work over several days. I tweaked the runes to hold out the effect for more than 20 minutes. It could be developed further in the future if you put your mind to it. Now, are you ready for the forging process? Harry nodded. The forging process was something well beyond his capabilities. Simply because it was a recent development in this particular field of study. Only licensed runic scripters are legally allowed to do the forging. So, Harry observed the process keenly as Professor Babbling showed him her craft. It was a process that combined extensive employment of charms and transfiguration. The runes would be ingrained into the final product after the forging process was completed. This was far different from the usual runestone making process. Besides, runestones were the oldest form of runic magic. They were still employed, but any runescriptor worth their salt has advanced away from runestone making. It took almost an hour for Professor Babbling to complete the forging process. When it was done, Harry took in the beauty of the final product. It was elegant and it was certainly powerful. He could feel the magic rolling over its surface. The bracelet shined with golden runes on its surface, thrumming with magical power. Well, there it is. Professor Babbling rubbed her hands in excitement with passion shining in her eyes. Of course, it'll need to be tested. I can do that, Professor, said Harry, taking the small bracelet from Professor Babbling's hands. Don't think I don't know where you are going to use it, Mr. Potter. Just remember that I helped you on the premise that this is for your project next year. I expect to see you submit an improved version of the present runic cluster before your OWL exams. Of course, Professor. XXXXXXX. Harry turned another page of the Transfiguration book he borrowed from the library. This one was a recommendation from Hermione, who thought advanced transfiguration would be of some help to him in the tasks. She was not wrong, but transfiguration was not exactly an easy discipline of magic that can be perfected overnight. It took months of dedicated work for transfiguration spells to work as intended, especially if it is human transfiguration. If it is known that he attempted human transfiguration, he might just get a year's worth of detention from McGonagall. Nonetheless, there are transfiguration spells that could be used as a backup if his plan A suffered any setbacks. And the good news is there was no human transfiguration involved. Despite the intuitive support from Voldemort's soul shard or whatever the ASB did with his mind, he was not willing to take risks that could hamper him when there were easy alternatives. Turning another page of the book, Harry was about to resume reading when a cushion hit him straight on his cheek, breaking his concentration. Sorry, Harry. Neville apologized before summoning the cushion back using the summoning charm. Intent, Neville. You have to focus on where you want the pillow to land. If you can't see the destination in your mind, the banishing charm won't work as you intend, said Hermione. His two friends have been going at the banishing and summoning charm for a while now. With Neville being an enthusiastic student eager to test his fledgling magic and Hermione eager to teach someone in her own unique way, the two were having the time of their life. Professor Flitwick had rolled out this whole thing about mastering the summoning charm and banishing charm using a cushion. The professor turned it into a competition of sorts, and he offered a book on charms from his personal collection for the pair to maintain the spell combo for the longest without fail. Hermione and Neville were practicing to stake their claim on the book. I don't know why you are interested in this book, Hermione. You could just find out the name of the book and order one from Flourish and Blots, Harry suggested as Hermione and Neville continued their practice. What if Professor Flitwick is offering a book that's rare and can't be found in Flourish and Blots? Hermione asked. Then I'm sure Hogwarts library would have it, Harry reasoned. In the restricted section, Hermione deadpanned. Which can be accessed by a permission slip from any of the professors. Besides, Do you really think Flitwick is going to hand out the copy of a book in the restricted section to a fourth year? Harry asked with a raised eyebrow, giving Hermione pause. Neville chose that moment to banish the cushion into Hermione's face, causing Hermione to lose focus and drop her wand. Well, that does it. Hermione huffed and vanished the cushion with a flick of her wand. Have you looked over the spell I found? I did. Did you know that transfigured flowers don't have the same smell as the original ones? I wonder why that's the case. Harry mused out loud. Hermione suddenly pulled the Transfiguration book from Harry and looked it over. This is not the page that I marked for you to read. Hermione stared daggers at him. A leaf fell into Harry's lap at that moment from the tree beneath which they were sitting. Harry pulled out his wand and used the Transfiguration spell Hermione marked out for him. The leaf twisted into an odd shape before changing into a flipper. There you see. I learned your spell. All I have to do is turn my shoes into flippers during the task, said Harry. With a flick of his wand, he turned the flipper back to the leaf. That's impressive. So, you are swimming to the bottom of the lake and reclaiming something valuable to you. Is that it? Asked Neville, a little bit put off by Hermione stopping the practice session. Swimming to the bottom of the lake is my plan B. So, what's plan A? Asked Neville. You'll find out soon, winked Harry, before going through a small list of spells that could be useful underwater. Chapter 33, The Second Task P2. Well, Hagrid seems to be doing okay. Harry commented from the side as he watched Hagrid introduce 2 unicorn foals to the class. Just as Professor Grubblyplank had managed to capture the interest of the class, Hagrid also attracted excited chitters from his Care of Magical Creatures class. Good thing those infernal scroats are nowhere to be seen. Maybe they got taken away or something, said Neville, a hopeful look on his face. Knowing Hagrid, I highly doubt that. But he seems to be doing okay. I wonder who planned out this lesson plan. Harry wondered out loud but looked meaningfully at Hermione. Stop looking at me like that, Hermione said before hitting him on his arm. Like what? Harry asked, rubbing his arm. Like I'm the mastermind of some terrible plot or something. I just gave Hagrid some fine pointers to keep his class interesting and safe, Hermione explained. Well, it seems to be working so far. Look, even Parkinson has a smile on her face. That ought to tell you your plan is working like a charm, Hermione, said Neville, pointing at a giggling pansy Parkinson feeding one of the foals with a bundle of grass. Hagrid, despite his obsession with huge monstrous magical creatures that any sensible wizard would run from, decided it was better to stick with Professor Grubblyplank's course. So, using his innate connection with the magical creatures of the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid managed to bring 2 baby unicorns to his class. It was hard enough to bring full-grown unicorns as they are incredibly shy of exposing themselves to wizards. The fact that Hagrid somehow managed to bring 2 golden-skinned unicorn foals totally blew everyone's mind. Mostly cause most wizards never manage to see a unicorn foal in their lifetime. They are closely guarded by the adult unicorns. I wonder how Hagrid managed to bring the 2 foals. Harry muttered as he too joined the crowd gathering around the foals. Gather round now. Just keep your hands to yourself. These foals won't run away from boys, but they sure'd like to run away if they sense trouble, Hagrid said to the whole class. Hagrid moved to the side so that the students could get more room to see the foals. These foals are just 1 year old. They grow horns when they're 4, and they turn silver when they're around 2. They're babies, so they're bit more trustin' than a full-grown unicorns. Harry absently paid some attention to Hagrid's explanations while looking at the 2 baby unicorns. They were pure gold in color, and under the sunlight, the foals looked like they were shining with a golden aura. Harry got only one word to describe the foals: ethereal. Hagrid was suddenly on his side and quietly led him to a corner away from the crowd. Ya doin' okay, Harry? If you want, I can let ya go from my class. Ya can go prepare for the task and all, Hagrid offered. Don't worry, Hagrid. If I can survive a full-grown dragon, I have nothing to worry about in the second task, said Harry, patting Hagrid on his arm to reassure the friendly half-giant that he was gonna win. That's the spirit, Harry. You show him good tomorrow. Hagrid patted him on the shoulder, happy to see Harry was confident about the task. Satisfied by the answer, Hagrid moved away from Harry to focus on the foals. He was alone only for a moment, as he was later joined by Daphne, who tapped on his shoulder to gain his attention. "Hey, Daphne. Curious to find you here after days of silence." "Sorry. With everything that has been going on after Black's trial, my housemates were on edge. Tracy thought it'd be a good idea to keep our distance until things cooled down," said Daphne. "And, have they? Cooled down, I mean?" Harry asked, raising his eyebrow. "For the time being," she said cautiously, not giving away anything. "Is Draco up to no good again?" Harry asked. "No." Daphne shook her head. "Not Draco. Let me worry about that. How's Mr. Black doing?" "He's fine. The last I heard, he is in a strict potion regimen under St. Mungo's healers." "Oh. In that case, tell him I wish him a speedy recovery." Harry nodded, but he noticed Daphne was sticking around, not quite sure how to proceed further. "Is there something else, Daphne?" he asked, taking pity on the girl. Oh, how the tables have turned. Harry distinctly remembered his time in school. Girls love to string along boys and let them stew in the oven. The fairer sex seems to derive a sick pleasure in watching boys struggle to articulate their thoughts in the open. So, Harry being calm and aloof was a change of position he was coming to appreciate. And just like those behavioral studies revealed, women are largely attracted to the most disagreeable male nearby. Considering the other circumstances that make him the best bad boy available, he could see why Daphne has this crush on him. It felt like the ball was in his court. He was in total control of this relationship. He could totally change the trajectory whenever he pleased. At least, he hoped that was the case. It could be possible he was reading too much into the situation. It has happened before, and he wouldn't be surprised if it was happening right now. No wonder why most girls were so confident back in school. Or maybe they were pretending. Who knows what's going on inside their heads? "Oh. I was just wondering if you were doing okay with the second task and all," said Daphne, looking awkwardly around. Harry merely smiled confidently and said, "I'll win tomorrow." Daphne was a bit stunned by the confidence shown by Harry, but she grinned and appreciated his resolve with a nod. "Oh. Good luck then." She was about to return to Tracy's side when Harry randomly threw a strange question at her. He couldn't help himself but throw in a subtle clue for Daphne. He was sure it'd be a surprise for her if his assumptions regarding his hostage panned out. "Have you ever seen the bottom of the Black Lake?" Daphne frowned as she could not discern anything from Harry's eyes. Nonetheless, she answered truthfully. "No. Would you like to?" Harry offered, a playful grin on his face. XXXXXXXXXX. Harry looked out of the window, enjoying the evening sun on his face. It was warm and he let out a sigh, enjoying the fuzzy feeling he was getting. Taking a sip from the hot chocolate in his cup, Harry relaxed into the chair and stretched out his legs. It was a nice day. Meow. Even Crookshanks agreed with him. Perhaps, Crookshanks was appreciating Harry's generous gesture of securing the half-Kneazle a bowl of fried beef for evening snacks. Reaching out with his hand, Harry scratched Crookshanks behind the ear, earning an appreciative purr from the feline. "Crookshanks is here. Where is Hermione?" Harry turned around to face Ron, who stood awkwardly by the bedside. "I don't know." Harry shrugged and returned to gazing out of the window. "She must be with Crumb then, huh?" Ron asked. Harry let out a non-committal hum but otherwise didn't bother to respond. Instead, he continued petting Crookshanks. "How's Sirius doing?" "He's all right." Ron seems to be struggling to pick up a conversation here, but Harry was not interested in entertaining one, especially when he was about to face the second task in half an hour. "Harry, haven't we been friends for years? Should we fight like this because of a girl?" Harry was struck speechless for a moment by how Ron worded the whole thing. If this was the redhead's attempt to rekindle, then Ron has definitely gone bonkers. Great question. I think it'd do some good if you ask that while looking at a mirror. Harry replied, a mocking tilt in his voice. Come on, Harry. I'm here to make amends. I'll even tolerate green grass, said Ron. Harry sat there on his chair stunned for a moment, wondering to himself whether there is any other human in the world as thick-headed as Ron Weasley. Recovering from the tangent his mind took, Harry slowly got up from the chair and faced Ron. You'll tolerate green grass? Oh, how generous of you. Harry mocked. Harry, I'm serious. Even if she is a slimy Slytherin, I can find ways to tolerate her. Ron said earnestly. Harry stared at Ron in wonder at the sheer stupidity coming out of Ron's mouth. He wondered how anyone could become friends with Ron Weasley. It took every iota of self-restraint within him for Harry to not punch some sense into the thick skull of Ron. At least, he wanted to really give a piece of his mind, but Harry imposed discipline on his mind and used declumancy to clear out emotions encroaching into his intellect. He was just about to participate in the task, and the last thing he wanted was a distracted mind. I can't ask you to make such a huge sacrifice, Ron. You should stay true to your hatred of all slimy Slytherins to the best of your ability, said Harry, before quickly taking his leave from the dorm, leaving a confused Ron all alone. Looking at his watch, there was still some time left before the task commenced. Harry preferred to be alone, so he found the perfect way. Casting the disillusion charm on his body, he made his way to the kitchen. A warm cup of tea and some biscuits should do the trick of freshening up his mind after the encounter with Ron. XXXXXXXXX. Harry was dressed only in a pair of swim trunks. He had foregone the rest of his clothes as it'd only hold him back under the lake. You okay there, Harry? If you need anything, let me know, said Neville. Well, I'd have preferred the sun to stay longer, but those freaky clouds are in the way. Harry aroused, already feeling the chill in the air. Why don't you just use warming charms? Asked Neville. Want to conserve my magic as much as possible. Harry answered. Then Harry felt a wand tap on his head and the feeling of warmth spread across his body. Here you go. All settled, said Tracy, pocketing her wand. Thanks. Harry nodded in appreciation. Tracy eyed him from head to toe and let out an appreciative whistle. You look like one of those sculptured statues in Rome. You are catching a lot of attention from girls, Harry. Tracy leaned in and whispered. Look. Even the French champion is eyeing you appreciatively. Tracy was right. Fleur Delacour was indeed looking at him. The funny thing was almost the entirety of the males present were looking at Fleur with glassy eyes. She was showing more skin than she usually did due to the nature of the task. The awkwardness of that could be seen on the French champion's face. She was certainly not enjoying all that attention. Oh, I wish Daphne was here. Speaking of which, Tracy said, before becoming serious all of a sudden. Where is Daphne? I haven't seen her since morning. Well, I have an idea where she might be at the moment, said Harry, eyeing the black lake out of the corner of his eyes. Before he could expand on that further, Bagman loudly cleared his throat with the aid of magic, magnifying his voice so that he could attract everyone's attention. Harry joined the other three champions and faced the judges sitting behind a table. A long golden-colored cloth covered the table and there were some marked changes among the judging panel. There was no Crouch Sr. representing the ministry. The man was supposedly on the run, after all. Instead, it was the Minister of Magic himself representing the British Ministry of Magic, with Percy Weasley tittering around the minister like an obedient but excited butterfly. The rest of the judges, Madame Maxime, Dumbledore, Karkaroff, and Ludo Bagman, remained the same. Bagman was on his feet, looking very pleased with himself, sitting between Karkaroff and Fudge. Now, please, ladies and gentlemen. Settle down. Before the task commences, I have an announcement to make. Due to some unforeseen events entirely out of our control, Mr. Crouch is unable to stand as a judge. But, fear not, for we have the Minister of Magic himself judging our brave champions in this task. So, we heartily welcome Minister Fudge, as he will also be a judge for the third task. Thank you, Minister, for allocating your valuable time for this event. Fudge took to his feet and waved at everyone before sitting down. Now, with that over, we can go to the champions. There are 4 champions and each of you has to recover what you lost. You have exactly 1 hour to retrieve this item. If you have worked out your clue, you'll know what it is that you must retrieve. So, without further ado, let the seeking begin. On the count of 3 then. 1, 2, 3. There was a loud whistle as Bagman finished the countdown and the champions all jumped into the lake except for Harry. Crumb used a partial transfiguration to grow gills and become a half-shark. Fleur and Cedric used the bubblehead charm to breathe underwater. Harry, on the other hand, merely raised his wand high into the air. Accio Firebolt. Fleur, Cedric and Crumb were nowhere to be found as they had begun the task. Harry, on the other hand, was standing by the lakeside as the stands along the lake erupted in cheers supporting their favored champions. "What's up, Potter? You waiting for your dead parents?" Harry could easily identify the culprit who threw that heckle. The voice was annoyingly familiar and Harry sort of expected something like this from the mini Death Eater in training. It was Draco Malfoy. No shocker there as far as he was concerned. Interestingly enough, the Slytherin students sitting close to Malfoy suddenly went silent instead of their usual mocking laughter. It worked to Harry's advantage in this case as he was already prepared for a rebuttal. "I'm waiting for your father to die, Malfoy, to pay a visit to your racist mother. After that good-for-nothing Death Eater father of yours dies, she needs to take care of you. With your family broke as it is, she needs all the customers she can find," Harry quipped. He couldn't see the reaction to his response as his broom chose that moment to zoom in from the sky. Catching the firebolt in his hand, Harry tapped his wand over the small steel bracelet at the tail end of the broom. The bracelet absorbed the sliver of magic he poured into making it visibly shine with runes of power forged into its outer surface. Harry took a look at the clock. It was nearly 5 minutes on the clock. Without wasting any more time, Harry climbed on the firebolt and took to the skies. Bagman, as usual, was excitingly shouting away. "Our youngest champion has taken to the skies on his broom. What is Harry Potter planning?" If the first task was any indication, people, never underestimate Harry Potter when it comes to magic. "Nice of you to do that, Bagman. That's a confidence booster," Harry muttered. Taking a deep breath, Harry took a moment to appreciate the wind blowing on his skin. Dipping the bow of his broom, Harry went straight down in a free fall, assisted by the firebolt's speed, towards the general location of the merpeople's village. The bracelet he painstakingly researched and forged with the help of Professor Babbling was designed with only one thing in mind. Its sole job is to repel water from the broom and the rider. It created a tightly knit space that repels all foreign physical elements. In this case, the runes created a shield that has the power to repel water. Strictly speaking, he could have achieved the same with a spell instead of using runes. However, the firebolt is a professional broom that has several top-notch safety features. It has innate magic peeled into the wood to resist any and all foreign magic. So, using runic bracelets is the only way, as this was one of the firebolt's features to be customized to the rider's preference. The tail end of the firebolt is left with several grooves for using these spell-forged bracelets. In the Americas, these bracelets are used to increase speeds for their broom racing tournaments. Perhaps, one day I should take a look at those tournaments. It should be fun, Harry thought as he prepared for the next step in his plan. Harry tapped the holly wand against his head, silently casting the bubblehead charm. Just before his broom handle touched the lake's surface, Harry pointed his wand ahead. Protego! A shimmering blue energy shield flickered into existence between his broom and the lake. With that, Harry plunged into the dark waters of the lake. There was a booming sound as he crashed into the lake, but true to the firebolt's superiority and the protection of the runes allot with the shield charm, Harry was completely safe. The bubblehead charm worked as advertised. Harry could breathe as normal as possible with the air bubble covering his head. He could feel the firebolt humming beneath him, waiting to properly accelerate in a direction. With a flick of his wand, Harry cancelled the shield charm as there was no point in pumping magic into the spell. He only wanted the shield to cushion the impact. Water was all around him now, but the runes kept them at bay. 25 minutes is the best time the runes could give, as attested by rigorous testing he conducted in the room of requirement. So he made his way into the lake. The water should have been dark to normal eyes. Not to Harry. Thanks to the Horus glasses he was wearing, the lake was as clear as the outside world. It barely took him 30 seconds to find the village. There was overgrown weed and other plant life abundant in the lake, but that didn't bother him all that much. He maneuvered the firebolt expertly around all those barriers to push into the village. However, he noticed a pack of Grindylows, horned and baring their pointy teeth, surge towards him. Clearly, they held hostile intentions. Expulso. A bright pink blip of light surged outward from the tip of his wand and struck the Grindylows. They were blown away, but so was Harry. Oh, fuck. Harry cursed as he struggled to control the firebolt. With some effort, Harry managed to regain control. Thankfully, the pack of Grindylows thought discretion is the better part of the valor. With the Grindylows leaving him alone, Harry was free to enter the merpeople's village unopposed. And that's what he did. He guided the firebolt to the depths of the lake. The further he went down, more and more stone structures were revealed hidden beneath long grass and weed. And then, he found the hostages. All 4 hostages were tied with a rope around a merman stone statue wielding a giant trident. The merpeople were gathered outside their stone dwellings silently watching. They had grayish skin and hair akin to the weeds floating around in the lake, long and green. Instead of legs, they had the tail end of a shark. A group of mermen were floating around the hostages with what appeared to be bronze tridents. Their bright yellow eyes followed his movement, and Harry was also keeping his eyes peeled for any hostile movement from these fascinating water creatures. Placing his hand against his heart, Harry dipped his head lightly. It was a form of greeting among the merpeople. A little something that he gleaned from Hagrid yesterday evening. Harry thought it wouldn't hurt to be a bit courteous. After all, he was participating in the freak show of a tournament at their home. To Harry's delight, he was given a similar greeting from the merpeople. Harry floated towards the hostages and pointed his wand at the ropes holding Daphne. Relatio. The ropes tying Daphne to the statue were swiftly removed, and he pulled her into the broom. Tapping his wand against her forehead, he cast the bubblehead charm before renervating Daphne from suspended sleep. With a gasp, Daphne opened her eyes. Panicking, she tried to move, but the water surrounding them made her movements sluggish. It took her a moment to realize where she was and what happened. This is the bottom of the bulk lake. Take a good look around. We'll have to leave soon, said Harry. Daphne looked around, taking in the stone structures and merpeople staring at them with open interest. Wait. You knew I was going to be put beneath the lake and never said a word. Daphne raged against him and began hitting him on his chest as the realization began to sink in. Harry laughed, and instead of putting a stop to Daphne, he pulled her close and urged the firebolt straight up. Daphne was forced to latch onto his body as the force of the water and their movement left her with no other choice. Together they broke out of the surface of the black lake and soared high into the air on the firebolt. Thunderous applause greeted Harry's ears as he cancelled the bubblehead charm and landed near the stands on his broom. Daphne was the first to get off the broom, totally red-faced and shivering with cold. Madame Pomfrey was there to receive her, and Daphne was forced to take a vial of pepper-up potion before she was smothered under a blanket. Very well done, Harry. You are the first to arrive, and within 20 minutes no less. Absolutely marvelous, said Bagman, squeezing Harry on his shoulder. Bagman was back on, with his voice amplified by the sonorous charm revving up Harry's timely finish of the task. Even Fudge gave him an enthusiastic shake hand, posing for a photo with the Daily Prophet photographer clicking away. Thankfully, he was dragged away from Minister Fudge and his slew of well-wishers by Madame Pomfrey. He was promptly offered a vial of pepper-up potion as well as blankets from the resident healer of Hogwarts. Harry didn't bother refusing any of it because of the stare that spoke volumes of Madame Pomfrey's intentions if he resisted in any way. Drowning the potion, Harry felt like he could run a marathon and barely shed a drop of sweat. His body was regularly trained by swimming for months. As such, he barely felt any effort in completing the task, as all the heavy lifting was done by the firebolt. You did it, Harry. You crushed everyone else. You completed the task within 20 minutes. Neville happily crowed, hugging Harry out of nowhere. Right, you are Neville. Pair that with the parting shot Harry gave to Malfoy. It was genius, said Fred, grinning like a loon. Right, you are twin of mine. We loved it. Malfoy was left speechless and even the Durmstrang students laughed at the ferret's expense. It was glorious. George exclaimed, with a smile stretching ear to ear on his face. Shush. George, did you forget we have a snake near us? Fred asked in a faux whisper. Then dramatically, the Weasley twins turned around to stare at Daphne. Their act would have been better if Daphne was not shivering up a storm under the blanket. She looks more like a cat under the rain rather than a snake. Harry joked, earning a few chuckles and an intense stare from the Slytherin. Oh, look. The snakes are multiplying, said George, suddenly pointing to the crowd. Tracy came over to Daphne's side and began helping to keep her friend warm. You okay? Harry asked, taking pity on the shivering mess that was Daphne. I'm not talking to you. Daphne turned up her nose and liked away from him. Girls. Harry shrugged. When the clock struck 30 minutes, Fleur surfaced. The only problem was she was carried by the merpeople and she failed to rescue her hostage. When Fleur regained her awareness and realized her little sister was left at the bottom of the lake, she became hysterical. Of course, she tried to make another go at the task, but Grindylows were all around the lake waiting for Fleur. She's not going to be allowed into the lake. The Grindylows have a long bloody history with Vila. They must have realized Delacour has Vila blood, said Neville. Now, Harry could have turned a blind eye and not act at this moment. He already won and he was sure he pretty much owned this task. When the third task would start, he'd definitely have an advantage as his points would let his early entry into the maze. However, Harry was also aware that this was an opportunity. Dumbledore was right on one thing. This tournament was indeed a chance to build better relationships with other people outside Britain. And Fleur Delacour was indeed a price worthy of certain risk. So, despite knowing that Fleur's sister would remain unharmed, Harry mounted his firebolt after charging the runes once more to the gasps of many. And he was right back at the bottom of the Black Lake. The merpeople were not so welcoming of Harry when they realized he was there for Fleur's hostage. Harry had to use a wide area banisher to dissuade them from interfering. He was back with Gabrielle in his arms before either Krum or Cedric returned with their hostage. That fact alone earned him more cheers from the crowd. You saved air. Thank you. Thank you. Fleur was quite expressive, showing her thanks by raining kisses down on his cheek. Feeling a bit cheeky and frankly because he found Fleur quite attractive, Harry used the opportunity to align himself in a way that Fleur ended up kissing him on his lips. He truly did not mean anything with that action. He was just hoping to put the French champion on the spot and have a laugh at her expense. However, what he didn't expect was for Fleur to quickly overcome any supposed awkwardness and actually engage him in a full-on French kiss right before the whole school. When they broke off for air, Harry knew one thing. There was not a hint of awkwardness in Fleur's eyes. In fact, he saw the look on Fleur's face and he knew that he has been made. She gave him a cheeky smile and a peck on his lips before running back to her sister. I'm such a moron. She knew what I was doing and she turned the table on me on spot. Now, I'm the idiot staring vacantly after her. Harry thought. Shaking his head, he tried to clear his mind. Tried being the key word here. Fleur's allure was lingering in the air like a finely aged wine. Its aroma, unlike other times, was far stronger than Harry could handle, especially in this vulnerable moment. Hence, his occlumency was virtually non-existent. He came to the realization that he was totally disarmed and he was struggling to decide on what to do next. It took every drop of courage left in him to not turn on his heels and run to avoid all the eyes on him, especially the lens of the Daily Prophet photographer. By the time the other champions made it to the stands with their hostages secured, Harry had the presence of mind to get properly dressed. He was still smarting from the whole debacle with Fleur, but he tried to put that behind despite Fred, George, and even Angelina teasing him without respite. When the points were declared, Harry did come up on top as he planned. With 49 points, he was the top scorer of the day. Karkaroff had tried to decrease his points, but Minister Fudge had a quiet word with the man. The one sole point he lost was because of Karkaroff. But that didn't bother him one bit. All that mattered was that he got the head start he deserved in the third task. He was certainly not looking forward to the bomb Fleur left him in the form of the kiss. Rumors are going to fly around, and he was certainly going to be at the center of everything once again. At least, he will not be painted as the villain here. He hoped that was the case. Chapter 34, The French Connection. It was as he feared. Harry might have an understanding with Rita Skeeter, but that doesn't mean she was not free to smear others. Looking at the front page of the special edition of the Daily Prophet, Harry involuntarily let out a groan. No wonder why the entire occupants of the Great Hall were looking at him with pity while throwing glares of dagger at the French champion. Save Harry Potter from the vile clutches of the French villa. If the heading looked bad, then the detailed article was straight-out poison. If this article was written in the Muggle world, there was a high probability that the Prophet would have gotten sued to Kingdom Come. Unfortunately, there are no laws that could be used against the Prophet in the British Isles, especially considering Fleur's subhuman status. Even if Fleur identifies herself as a quarter Vila, the British Ministry of Magic would refuse to acknowledge her as such. She would still belong to the Vila species. This has been the case for werewolves, so Harry didn't think it'd be any different for Vila. Fleur could approach the ICW, but they tend to overlook incidents like this so long as there is no physical harm involved. Not to mention, the ICW can't exactly lean on an issue that has almost no legal leg to stand on. The ICW can't create laws and impose them on a member nation. Maybe, if the Daily Prophet has distribution in a nation where there are defamation laws, things might be a bit different. This shoddy state of affairs left someone like Fleur at the mercy of public smearing from dirty rags like the Daily Prophet. Maybe the Witches Weekly should hopefully put up a good piece on Fleur, not that it bothered Harry much. Neither did he think it mattered much to Fleur either. She is a French witch. He'd be surprised if Fleur was an avid reader of British print media. Not that it mattered. If Fleur was not familiar with the British print media, she was going to be. As Harry learned this academic year, you can ignore the morons, but the morons certainly won't ignore you. The ministry should look into this, Harry. That Vila Tart forced you to complete her task with her Vila powers. Who knows what else she can do with her dark magic? Harry pinched the area between his eyes as the walking-talking nuisance that was Ron Weasley began airing off his unwanted opinions at the Gryffindor table. Don't be an idiot, Ron. Vila can't force other people to obey their commands. Hermione argued. How do you know, huh? I bet Krum and Delacour are in on this dark magic plot against Harry, said Ron. Harry found resistance was futile, so he rolled his eyes and looked to the heavens. The enchanted ceiling of Hogwarts greeted his eyes with bright twinkling stars. No help is coming from there, said Katie, who was sitting next to him. Here, have some chicken. Thanks. Harry said, taking the offered dish and scooping a few small pieces into his plate. You need anything else, Harry? Asked Katie. Some peace of mind. Harry gestured covertly at the red-headed demon sitting beside him, noisily chewing away like a caveman. All out of stock, Harry, said Katie, a laugh escaping her lips. A club would do, said Harry, hitting the end of his spoon on his thumb, demonstrating his intentions clear. A silencing charm should do the trick, Harry. Oh, yeah, said Harry, covertly taking his wand into his hand. Lying lock. The sheer will and intent behind the spell made it possible that there was no need for his wand to be pointed at Ron. The spell worked like a charm, and Ron's tongue got stuck to the roof of his mouth, providing much-needed peace to the table. That's a neat trick. Katie hummed in appreciation while Ron choked and heaved, holding his throat. Suddenly a commotion broke out at the Ravenclaw table. The ravens were screaming and trying to hide under their table as the fire began spreading everywhere. Interestingly enough, the table never caught fire. Only the local Daily Rag was becoming ashes from the orange-colored flames. In the middle of this spreading fire stood Fleur Delacour with her palms surging with a raging fire that was progressively turning red. Mademoiselle Delacour. There was raw power and magic behind the Bosbaten's headmistress' words. The chandeliers hanging from the ceiling of the great hall swayed and the lights on it flickered by the magical outburst. There was a brief lull inside the great hall as Madame Maxime exerted her magical power over the hall. Even Harry, who prided himself as a censor of all things magic, was flummoxed how the French headmistress escaped his radar. The waves of magical energy tickling his senses were enormous and its effect was fortunately strong enough to snuff out the fires. Harry, like almost everyone else, looked between the French champion and her headmistress. It looked like the two were about to go at each other's throats. But, the intense stare-down was broken by Fleur, who proceeded to walk out of the great hall. "Well, that was interesting," said Katie, after the great hall settled down from the drama. "Yeah, interesting," Harry said, absently looking at the hall's entrance through which Fleur disappeared into. The next day, the atmosphere in the castle was less hectic, but Harry was still hounded by his peers about the events happening under the lake. Since the audience only got to look at the tranquil surface of the Black Lake, every bit of detail that he could divulge was gold for his audience. Not that he was an enthusiast of sharing the story of what happened under the lake. But, getting the story out would certainly unload all the hounding, especially considering this was a Sunday. There were no classes, so Harry found it hard-pressed to evade the questions. So, he found himself in the Gryffindor common room regaling the events under the lake from his point of view. Then I was set upon by merepeople brandishing their tridents and all. I had to use the blasting curse to sweep them aside and rescue Gabrielle Delacour. Finally, he was finished with the telltale session. "How did you manage to use your broom in the lake, Harry?" "I was under the impression brooms don't work under water bodies," asked Hermione, who was for once happy to be left alone because of her status as something Krum would sorely miss. "Oh, that's thanks to this beauty," said Harry, fishing out the spell-forged runic bracelets used on his broom. Oh, the twins immediately zeroed in on the bracelet, but Hermione was quick with her hands. She took the bracelet into her hands and started excitedly chattering away, throwing out details of runes she could find on the bracelet. While this was happening, the story was slowly being spread around with some tweaks here and there. While this was happening, Harry carefully slipped out of the Gryffindor Tower. Just as he reached the entrance, it swung open with McGonagall on the other side. "Ah, Mr. Potter. Just the person I was looking for. You need to come with me," McGonagall said briskly. "Am I in some sort of trouble, Professor?" "That depends. Did you do something that might land you in trouble?" McGonagall asked, raising her eyebrow. "Not that I know of, Professor." "Then come along. We have a long walk towards the headmaster's office," said McGonagall before leading the way. Shrugging his shoulders, Harry followed his head of house. When they finally reached the headmaster's office, it was packed with quite a lot of people. "Harry!" He was immediately swept into a hug by none other than Sirius. "Sirius! I thought you were asked to rest your body?" "I was, but when has that stopped me? Besides, I have been out of prison for more than a year now." "I have had enough time to rest thanks to you," said Sirius, releasing Harry from the hug, a smile stretching from ear to ear. "Well, congratulations are in order. I hear you achieved a sweeping victory at the second task." "Something along those lines." "You are looking good," said Harry, once taking a close look at Sirius from head to toe. "You have filled out more. The potions seem to be working well. You don't know the half of it. This body is running on potions alone. My mother had this house elf called Creature. The little blighter has gone bonkers living alone with my mother. Anything he cooks might be poison for all I know, as he hates my guts. So, good food is getting scarce." "Ahem." Dumbledore cleared his throat, attacking their attention. "While I'm sure you two would like to catch up, I'm afraid we have pressing matters to attend to," said Dumbledore. It was then Harry noticed the other group of people inside the headmaster's office. A family of silver blondes and blue eyes was standing conspicuously at the corner with Madame Maxime and Fleur. He easily identified the younger sister of Fleur, Gabrielle, who was looking at him with a large smile. Then there was a tall man wearing shiny blue robes and an equally royal blue sugarloaf hat with a white feather on top. Harry would have mocked the whole 18th century dress code, but there was no point compared to the flashy monstrosity covering up Dumbledore. Anything was better. We have not met Monsieur Potter. I am Jean-Pierre Delacour. Fleur is my daughter, the man introduced himself while offering his hand. Glad to meet you, Monsieur Delacour. You have a wonderful family, said Harry, shaking hands with Mr. Delacour. This is my wife Apollon. Mr. Delacour introduced him to what Harry would describe as the most beautiful woman in the world. However, he was expecting the natural beauty of Avila to be a distraction, so he had fortified his mind while exchanging greetings with Mr. Delacour. Glad to meet you, Madame Delacour. A pleasure, Monsieur Potter. Harry nodded before turning to face Dumbledore, who has yet to move from his seat behind the desk. So, am I to assume this has something to do with the second task? Harry asked, looking at the grave faces everyone was making. Not exactly about the second task per se, Harry. But, your actions in the second task and the Daily Prophet article have certainly prompted this meeting, said Dumbledore. Mr. Potter, after the article about Fleur came up in the Daily Prophet, she has received several letters from the British public. Mr. Delacour explained. Those were not letters, Monsieur Potter. They were howlers. Some of them had poison and horrible curses. Mrs. Delacour claimed, looking ready to burn the miscreants if she could get her hands on them. I had nothing to do with any of that, said Harry, looking between the two headmasters and Fleur's family. Of that, we have no doubt, Harry. But, that's not why we asked you here, said Dumbledore, looking serene behind his half-moon spectacles. They want you to put out a statement in the Prophet refuting the claims of Skeeter. Your words should bring some much-needed respite to Miss Delacour and her family, said Sirius, then suddenly he showed hesitation before adding, that is, of course, if the claims of the article are false. You don't have to feel pressured to do anything, Harry. Mr. Black. McGonagall snapped. What? Sirius challenged. I was not there when this whole thing happened. If Harry was compelled to act as the Prophet seems to suggest, then what would you have my godson do? Tell a lie in front of the whole world? Harry noticed Dumbledore, Madame Maxime, and virtually everyone was going to object to Sirius. He didn't want this problem to create any more fuss. So, he decided to intervene. Fleur didn't use her allure. I went into the lake on my own. She had nothing to do with it, said Harry. Are you sure? Sirius asked, concern shining in his eyes. Vila Allure cannot act like the Imperious Curse, Sirius. It certainly can't make me do something that I really don't want to. Besides, even if Fleur used her allure as the Prophet suggests, I wouldn't become a drooling lovesick fool. I am a. Harry trailed off as he didn't want the information of his occlumency training to be out, but at the same time he didn't want Fleur to feel any guilt because of her legacy. Even if he remained sympathetic to Fleur's plight, he was not willing to disclose his secrets in front of Dumbledore. The man already has enough information in his hand. Far too much, in his opinion. So, he switched gears in an instant. I can speak Parseltongue. I know how people can be prejudicial and idiotic morons. I had no control over the way I am born, but I'm proud of everything that I was and am since my birth. And I don't want anyone else to be discriminated against because of the way they are born. One of my best friends is a half-giant and I trust him with my life despite what society would have me believe. So, what I'm saying is I'll be happy to do anything to ensure Fleur and, of course, her family is left alone. Wonderfully put, Harry. It is our differences that make the world a brighter place. Oftentimes, we tend to forget this simple truth, said Dumbledore. For once, Harry didn't disagree with Dumbledore. When the meeting in Dumbledore's office concluded, Harry was frankly bored out of his mind. He lost almost an hour constructing the words he was going to use in his response to the Daily Prophet article. He could have used that time to read a book or even just play a game. Then there was the possibility of getting photo shoots and whatnot in the evening. There goes another few minutes of his valuable time. However, he didn't want to be a jerk and leave without saying anything to Fleur. The French which may have been dismissive of him from the start, but that doesn't mean she deserved the type of insults and attacks by racist morons in the wizarding world. Hey, Fleur. Would it be alright if I can talk to you privately? Harry asked, and he immediately got a positive response from the French champion. That's how they found themselves near the greenhouse. Thankfully, there was no one around, but Harry still put up a ward to ensure nothing was overheard or they were even seen together. I am truly sorry that you had to go through all that. The British wizarding community is too much influenced by pure-blood supremacy. And you need not worry about your allure. It is a part of you just as Parseltongue is a part of me. Do not resent your heritage because of people who refuse to be open-minded, said Harry. I thank you, Harry. But, you would not have fallen for my allure, no? Fleur asked, her eyes held a certain conviction that she knew this for a fact. Harry then remembered Fleur had once tried to put him under the spell, possibly to humiliate him at the Yule Ball. Ah, no. I'm a student of the mind arts. While I won't claim mastery over occlumency, I have enough knowledge to withstand a foreign assault on my mind. Truly. Fleur seems taken aback by his response, which made Harry a bit confused. Yes, truly. How do you think I resisted your allure? Asked Harry curiously. Fleur didn't answer but instead leaned forward and kissed him full on his lips. Harry, though initially surprised, did indeed actively participate in the kiss. His mind had gone blank and the exploding sensation on his lips and tongue was the only thing that remained. There was also that burning feeling in his heart that pushed and goaded him for more. His self-restraint nearly snapped when Fleur deepened the kiss as her fingers slinked into his hair, holding him steady. In the end, his hands were on Fleur's hips. It was as if a dam was broken inside his mind. A wave of emotions washed over him and every fiber of his being was overlooked with passion. The need for air forced Fleur and Harry apart. Do you think I need my allure to attract you, Harry? Fleur asked coyly. Harry stared into the mesmerizing pair of blue gems that were Fleur's eyes. No, you don't. And they were kissing again with reckless abandon. Chapter 35, A Forbidden Love? So, you just let her kiss you? Asked Sirius, looking incredulously at Harry from the two-way mirror. Harry had hoped sharing what happened between him and Fleur with someone would aid him in properly processing what happened. He thought being truthful about what happened and unearthing his feelings might help him in some way. Instead, all he was getting, for the time being, was an immense sense of achievement. But Sirius' initial reaction was not approval. Harry, you dog. Way to go, pup. My godson French kissing Avila. You've made your godfather proud. Sirius crowed with delight. And there it is. I stand corrected. Harry thought as he watched Sirius begin hopping around the Black Manor laughing like a hyena. So, you don't find it weird for me to, you know. Harry stuttered, searching for words. For you to score with Avila. Sirius finished for him before breaking out into laughter. Oh, Harry. It's not a crime for a growing boy to get interested in a girl. Especially when that girl has the hots for you for saving her sister. Aha. Harry mumbled distractedly. Truth be told, he was not even sure why he was even feeling like he had done some mistake. It is not as if he was committing a crime or something. As a matter of fact, it was Fleur who took up the initiative in this relationship. Is this a relationship? Harry asked himself. Don't be so dramatic, Harry. You kissed a girl. Why are you acting like the world is about to end? Asked Sirius. Tell you the truth, I don't have a clue. It's probably some stupid teenage hormones. Harry groused, rubbing his face tiredly. Listen to me, Harry. Sirius' features suddenly became sharp in the mirror. The age that you are in and the time you spend in Hogwarts are not going to remain in your life. This is the time for you to be carefree and act like a kid. You have too much on your shoulders. So, my advice is for you to go and enjoy the little things in your life. Play pranks, make some trouble, make friends, eat sweets, play Quidditch, date girls, just enjoy. Stop worrying so much. That's a piece of nice advice, Sirius. But, there is more at stake here than you know, said Harry. The tournament? You have done exceptionally well so far. Even if we don't know who put your name, the presence of Dumbledore and Moody should keep them away from acting directly. Harry kept his silence at Sirius' reasoning. Looking at Sirius' concerned face, Harry was tempted to share everything he knew of what the future held. He wanted to share the knowledge in his head, but one thing held him back. Fear. Harry feared the unintended consequences his knowledge of the events to transpire would unleash. Moreover, how would he explain the source of his knowledge? It is not as if he can just share with anyone his true origins. Most people would accuse him of madness, and on the off chance they believe him, he might end up under the care of unspeakables or worse. So, his mind was split into two, and both sides were warring with each other because of the coming third task. The general plan he had in the making was the reason behind his skittishness. After all, he was up against the most psychotic Dark Lord Britain has ever faced, and certain details of his plan were surely going to piss off Voldemort. Then there was the element of risk involved, as he'd be knowingly walking into a minefield. Combine that with the latest emotional entanglements were turning out to be a headache for him. Seeing no other option, Harry changed the subject, as he was not ready to discuss the matter. Leaving that aside. "How's Winky doing?" asked Harry. "Oh, yes. Thanks for sending Winky, by the way. She has been a lot of help. The little old blighter is not at all happy with Winky, and that alone just makes my day," said Sirius. "Sirius, don't underestimate house elves. They have powerful magic at their disposal. Making an enemy out of them is not a good idea," Harry warned. "Can't help it if the resident elf hates my guts because of my loony mother. It's not like I can somehow make creature like me when his resolve to hate me overrides any effort I make. Anyway, having Winky here reminds me." Sirius was suddenly gone from the mirror for a moment. Harry could hear some snippets of conversation from the other side about Sirius having what he assumed was a shouting match with Creature. There were some strong words being thrown around, along with a shrill scream from a woman. A minute later, Sirius appeared in the mirror holding a stack of books. "I had to fight tooth and nail to get these beauties out of the library," said Sirius. "What are those?" asked Harry, his interest peaking at the dusty old tomes in Sirius' hands. "You have improved in spell casting fast, and you seem to have an uncanny skill with silent magic. These books should increase your repository of spells and help you develop spell chains," said Sirius, raising an eyebrow. "You remember those, right?" "Yeah, I remember. Spell chains are used to keep your adversary in defense and possibly to break shields. Well, there is more to them than that. Study these books." "I'll have Winky set them up in the chamber," said Sirius. "Thank you, Sirius. A word of caution, Harry. There are some nasty spells in the books. Borderline dark magic. I won't ask you to ignore them, but be cautious. Do not overuse them, and be very careful if you practice them," warned Sirius. "I promise to be vigilant, Sirius." Harry promised. "Good. Keep up your training, Harry, and don't worry about what others might think of you. Enjoy your time in Hogwarts." "That's what James and Lily would have wanted," said Sirius before saying goodbye, and the mirror went blank. There was a sudden pop. It was Winky with a stack of books in her hand. "Mr. Black wanted Winky to give you these books, Master Harry." "Thank you, Winky. Please keep an eye on Creature and ask Sirius to update the wards around Black Manor." "Winky will do that, Master," the house elf happily nodded, flapping her long ears before disappearing with the customary pop. Harry leaned back in his chair and looked at the books he received from Sirius. He made a cursory look at the book covers, which made him notice that most books were written by blacks. No wonder Creature made a fuss. These books are heirlooms of House Black, Harry thought. Standing up from his chair, Harry paced back and forth as his mind churned with indecision. The third task was set to take place on June 24th. There were more than 3 months in between for him to make a decision. 2 choices lay before Harry. He stopped pacing and took 2 papers from his table and pinned them to a board. On one paper, there was a descriptive plan which started off with an anonymous tip to the Auror office. On the other, he'd take the risk and let Voldemort's plan to kidnap him to the graveyard succeed. Of course, these 2 plans were just being considered, and Harry was yet to fill in the details. Should I extend a modicum of trust to the DMLE or should I take the risk and handle this on my own? Decisions. Harry mused, while staring at the two pieces of paper that'd determine the way forward. Noticing the time, Harry made sure to smooth out any wrinkles on his robe and adjusted the grip of his tie. There was an interview to be made and he was expected to be at the headmaster's office. Giving one last look to his lair, Harry summoned Dobby and teleported away from the chamber. XXXXXXX. The Great Hall was abuzz as the Daily Prophet sported Harry's statement on the front page. Although, that was a small detail compared to the juicy piece Rita Skeeter wrote about Hermione and Krum. Forbidden love of Victor Krum. Harry sneaked a peek at the couple who was supposedly having forbidden love, according to Skeeter. Krum was practically fuming as some of his friends from Durmstrang were whispering into his ears. Hermione, on the other hand, was red as a tomato, looking like her head might explode with all the blood rushing to her cheeks. He went back to the article at hand. The youngest seeker in the history of professional Quidditch leads a life of great wealth, fame, and comfort. Or so we assumed. It is only recently that we at the Prophet learned about the heartache and churning state of mind of Victor Krum, who was also the champion of Durmstrang Institute for Magical Learning. For quite a while now, young Mr. Krum has been the center of attention after his spectacular performance in the Quidditch World Cup. As a young Quidditch star, he has been most assuredly the recipient of a lot of love from his fans and admirers. Yet, the roguish Bulgarian has never shown an interest in witches. This had kept his many fans and admirers of the fairer sex hopeful for the chance to become Mr. Krum's lover. Unfortunately, such hopefuls may find themselves in utter disappointment. Mr. Krum has finally found love at Hogwarts. Hermione Granger, a bright young Muggle-born witch who also happens to be best friends with Harry Potter, the boy who lived. It is said that the first sparks of love between the unlikely couple bloomed inside the Hogwarts library. Miss Granger, being the top student of her year, is an avid visitor of the Hogwarts library. If rumors are to be believed, Miss Granger is also the secret behind her boyfriend's better performance, even though falling behind Harry Potter in points. However, their young love is being threatened by the former Death Eater and the current headmaster of Durmstrang, Igor Karkaroff. It'd seem, though exonerated by the Wisingamot, Igor Karkaroff still holds faith in his former life choices. Apparently, the headmaster of Durmstrang is of the view that a Muggle-born dating his student is unacceptable. Perhaps, the animosity of the Durmstrang headmaster is because of Miss Granger's close friendship with the boy who lived. When asked about Mr. Potter's friendship with Miss Granger in a recent interview with the Daily Prophet correspondent, the hero of Wizarding Britain had this to say. Hermione is my best friend. She is fiercely intelligent and competitive. She has always supported me and helped me face the tasks head-on, along with Neville Longbottom and many other Gryffindors. In the House of Gryffindor, I have a second family. I'd say she is like a sister to me. It is the hope of the well-wishers of the couple that Albus Dumbledore keeps an eye on the headmaster of Durmstrang. It is surely not a coincidence that Igor Karkaroff refuses to give points to Harry Potter despite his stellar performance in the tasks and now his apparent disapproval of Mr. Krum's relationship. The recent events have shown us that many Death Eaters have slipped through the cracks of our justice system. Is Igor Karkaroff one of them? We at the Prophet hope otherwise, but recent events paint a bleak picture. Harry set the Prophet down with half relief and the other half concerned. He was relieved to note the possibility of attention splitting from Fleur. At the same time, he was concerned about undue attention being heaped on Hermione. Her status as a Muggle-born could be a cause for getting negative attention from a section of the Wizarding Society. That shrew of a woman. Can't she write anything except hearsay? Asked Hermione, looking astonished at the article on the front page of the Prophet. It's not just in the Prophet. There is another one in the Witch Weekly, said Katie Bell, pushing the magazine towards Hermione's side. Oh, no. Hermione let out a groan as she hid her face in her hands. The only other person who found it more offensive than Hermione was Ron. The redhead was glaring daggers at the Prophet as if it contained some blasphemy. Thankfully, Harry was sitting between Katie and Angelina this time around. I need to find a suitable gift for Katie. Harry decided, as he was enjoying the relative peace and quiet he was enjoying between the two chasers. Harry quickly finished breakfast before he made a hasty retreat to the Owlery. "Hedwig," he called out, and his trusted snowy owl swooped down from the group of owls perching high in the tower. He tied the letter he had in his hand to one of the legs of Hedwig. "Give it to Andromeda." Hedwig let out a hoot before taking to the skies. It was a letter asking Andromeda to ensure strong wards around the Black Manor. With her extensive contacts, she should be able to suggest some good professionals in the field. Better safe than sorry, with Malfoy most likely looking to score a hit. As he was about to leave the Owlery, he was stopped by the arrival of Fleur. The coy smile on her lips keyed him into the reason she was present here. It was certainly not for sending an owl. "Bonjour, Harry. I've got potions coming up in a few minutes," Harry said, but it came out weak to his own ears. "That is more than enough," said Fleur as she wrapped her hands around his neck. "I've to thank you properly, Harry." Fleur breathed into his ear. "Oh, boy. Why is the French accent so hot?" Harry thought, just before his lips were engaged in a tango with Fleur. It took Harry quite a bit of effort to untangle himself from Fleur. Could anybody blame him? He was a hormonal teenager with a hot girl seeking out snogging sessions in the coziest situations and places. Harry ran as fast as his legs could carry while thoughts of Fleur dominated his mind. How could they not? He was feeling the searing kisses Fleur had showered all along his neck. He could still feel her hot breath on his ears. Even his occlumency techniques were useless in clearing these thoughts from his mind. Running a flight of steps down into the dungeons, Harry finally reached his destination. Unfortunately, Snape was already in the class with all the students taking their seats. "Ah, of course. I was wondering where you had gone off to, Potter. Perhaps there was an interview you needed to attend." Snape silkily prodded, making the Slytherins let out a small laugh. Harry kept his cool, refusing to take the bait. "I apologize for my tardiness, Professor," said Harry. "I'm sure, Potter. I'll be reporting you to Professor McGonagall. Now, stop wasting my time and get inside the class." Snape snapped, a satisfied smile on his face while resuming the class. Harry sat next to Neville, who looked like a melting ice cream. "I was afraid of sitting all alone here." "Where were you?" Harry was reminded of Fleur's long fingers gliding through his hair, making him shiver at the pleasure of the mere memory. "I had a letter to send," Harry muttered as he tried to concentrate on the instructions on the board. It was easier said than done. His arms went through the motions, but his mind was on Fleur and her pouty lips. "I need to have a word with Fleur. There must be some boundaries," Harry resolved. Chapter 36, The Half-Blood Prince. "So, is there any reason why you are not going to help me with runes anymore?" asked Harry, poking Tracy with the feathery end of his quill. "You are already better than most in our class. You don't need my help anymore." "But, the main reason is because of what you did to Daphne," said Tracy. Harry was taken back. "What I did to Daphne?" Harry asked incredulously. Tracy muttered something along the lines of thick-headed boys. "Because of you, she got kidnapped for that stupid task. I had nothing to do with that." It was true in a sense. He was not 100% sure about Daphne being his hostage. But of course, his protest fell on deaf ears. "You rescued her and then snogged that Vila harlot in front of her and the school." "That was an accident." Harry cut in, and he was not happy with Tracy calling Fleur names. "Then you ignored her for the next few days." "Hey!" Harry protested. "Daphne was the one who said she is not interested in talking to me. Besides, why is she bothered when Fleur kissed me?" "Because she likes you, Potato Head," Tracy hissed. "Really?" "She never said a word about anything like that," said Harry, folding his hands across his chest. A small lie. He could deduce Daphne harbored a crush, but that was not relevant here. "Then what were you doing cozying up to her at the Yule Ball?" "Were you just using her to get what you wanted?" asked Tracy, her voice eerily similar to the hissing of an angry snake. And can you say Daphne was not using me to get what she wanted? Harry snapped back. For once, Tracy suddenly looked hesitant, and that was the wriggle room he needed. What did your friend tell you about our supposed date in Hogsmeade? Harry asked, but silence was the answer. I thought so. So, don't come preaching to me, Tracy, on who is using whom. The silence between them stretched on while they worked on their rune work. Okay. All right. I'll have Daphne speak to you and you two talk it out today evening. Tracy finally suggested, breaking the silence. Now, Harry was in a real bind. He was hoping Tracy would drop the topic at least for today. It'd have certainly given him some breathing room to get his emotions in order regarding Fleur. He was also not looking forward to a serious conversation with Daphne. If what Tracy said is true and Daphne genuinely liked him beyond any political necessities, then it'd be foolish of him to shoot her down. He could come out clean and be truthful about his current trysts with Fleur, but common sense pulled him back from making such a blunder. Daphne is the heiress of House Greengrass, and like it or not she will be inheriting a substantial fortune in the future. Her father is already a powerful man, and Harry had personally witnessed how wily the man can be. With the second Wizarding War looming on the horizon, Harry realized he should be looking to score allies or at worst keep as many powerful purebloods neutral. It'd be to his advantage to have the Greengrasses in his corner instead of working against him. He was not going to give them a reason to turn against him, especially when he was in the dark when it comes to the motivations behind Damian Greengrass. He did not for a moment believe the man only helped because of a wish to see Malfoy being taken down a peg or to secure obscure tomes. His mind urged him there was something at play here, considering Malfoy's smooth escape from prison despite the man's financial woes. Not just that. In the books, Astoria Greengrass ends up marrying Draco Malfoy after the war. So, he was very skeptical of Damian Greengrass' aid. The only reason he had gone out of his way to please the man was to ensure Sirius' freedom. With Sirius free, Harry was one step closer to breaking Dumbledore's hold on his life. Keeping all this in mind, Harry searched for a way to push a meeting with Daphne away till he got a grip on the issue at hand. What he needed was time to come up with a plan. The simpler way would have been to push Fleur away, but that was not happening. Not on his watch. It was the unspoken code of his love life to not leave a beautiful woman disappointed, especially when it is the woman who's approaching him. In this case, it was Fleur who approached him and initiated the relationship. He'd be an idiot to not reciprocate. So, how can I escape out of this trap? Harry pondered. Suddenly, his eyes widened with realization. Oh, Snape. You wonderful bastard. You just saved me. Harry thought giddily before putting on an appropriate amount of regret on his face as he addressed Tracy. Sorry, Tracy. I've got detention with Snape for the whole week, said Harry. But, isn't Professor Snape supposed to be on probation? How can he assign you detention? Tracy asked skeptically. He didn't. The prick ratted me out to McGonagall for being late to potions. She complimented me for my win on the second task and promptly slapped me with a week's detention with the resident bat of the dungeons. For a moment Tracy didn't say anything before letting out, "Huh? What does that mean?" Harry wondered. He was careful not to air his thoughts out. Can I believe the two of you have finished your discussion, Miss Davis, Mr. Potter? Asked Professor Babbling, a sharp look on her face. Harry muttered out a hasty apology, as did Tracy, but it never saved them from getting detention with the ancient runes professor. Man, I really miss the point system. Without the House Cup in play, detentions were the go-to disciplinary action from the professors. XXXXXXXX. The dark oak doors of the dungeon stared back at him ominously. Harry could smell the residue of potion fumes lingering in the air. He sniffed the air. Smells like ginger. Harry thought as he rubbed his nose. Without further ado, Harry knocked on the door twice and waited. The door swung open with Snape on the other side in his usual greasy self. Potter. I see. It had seen even celebrities have to attend detentions. Snape said, his classic sneer taking life on his crooked face. It'd seem you have to walk 3 flights of stairs and 3 long corridors to get a detention for little old me. Harry snapped back just as fiercely. Mind your tongue, Potter. You first, Snape. Your misconception is that you won some kind of victory here. The only thing you won, Snape, is my company. I came here out of respect for Professor McGonagall. If you are planning to present your sunny personality any longer, I'll be on my way back. So, you choose. Harry asserted, staring resolutely into the onyx-colored eyes of Snape. Just because he agreed to serve detention under Snape doesn't mean he was going to tolerate Snape's unique personality. It was a battle of wills, one Harry was confident he'd win. Snape could either admit him inside or just stare at him with his exalted greasy self. That'd amount to a sum total of nothing. Of course, Snape could go to McGonagall and increase his detentions. Get inside and begin scrubbing the bottom of cauldrons. I want those cleaned before you clean the glass vials in the cabinet. Snape snapped before turning away and walking into the potions class with his robes billowing behind his back. Harry smirked at Snape's retreating form. The man would huff and puff, but if Harry stands his ground, Snape would fold like a lawn chair. Because they both know Snape is on thin ice. Dumbledore could only protect the potion master so many times. As Harry began his work, Snape became his usual douche self within a few minutes. Tell me, Potter. What sordid scheme are you planning with Granger this time? Harry looked at the potions master out of the corner of his eye but otherwise remained silent. You might be a pint-sized celebrity who can do no wrong in many eyes. I'm not one of them, Potter. If I find out that you are the one who was stealing Boomslang's skin from my private stores, you'll be lucky enough to get an expelling letter from Hogwarts. Snape hissed, eyes squint and his greasy hair looking like a veil of darkness flaring in the light. Harry said nothing and wondered how someone like Snape was being fooled by Barty Crouch Jr. Surely, if Snape's private store was being raided by Moody repeatedly, then someone like Snape would have found ways to track the thief. It made him wonder whether Snape was aware of the fake Moody prowling the halls of Hogwarts. He wouldn't put it past both Dumbledore and Snape to play ignorant of the fake Moody. Do you know what is the punishment for stealing, Potter? Asked Snape. I know it is certainly not as severe as making unsubstantiated accusations against a minor who was also the head of a founding noble house and also has the backing of one of the richest noble house. So, choose your next words very carefully, because I can see a cold dark cell with those soul suckers for company in your near future. Harry snapped back, having enough of the bullshit from the greasy git. Why, you arrogant little... Snape trailed off as there was a knock on the door. As Snape retreated to address the door, Harry continued to scrub the bottoms of the cauldrons. It was then Harry noticed an open cupboard on the far end with some books on the top shelf. It immediately struck him. I'm in the potions classroom for 6th and 7th years. Harry thought. He looked towards the door and it was Karkaroff on the other side, looking rather pale and out of breath. We need to talk, Severus. This is important. I won't allow you to slither away this time. Karkaroff said, a hint of desperation in his voice coming through. What do you want, Karkaroff? I am rather busy. Snape growled, looking ready to pack Karkaroff in a matchbox. We need to talk about this, said Karkaroff, who proceeded to fold his left sleeve up and show it to Snape. Harry assumed it was the dark mark because Snape was suddenly very reluctant to continue the conversation. Harry paid that no mind. It was not exactly news to him that Voldemort was regaining his powers as days go by. Instead, he used the opportunity to nick something useful from the classroom. Looking forward to seeing whether his hunch was right, Harry silently uttered the summoning charm while discreetly aiming his wand at the cupboard. Accio Half-Blood Prince's Potion Book. To his delight, a book flew across the classroom from the cupboard and settled in his hand. A cursory look at the book revealed it was the 6th-year potions book of the Half-Blood Prince. Quickly before Snape could notice, Harry pocketed the book inside his cloak, securing it with a sticking charm for good measure. Harry took a look at the Death Eater duo. Fortunately, they were rather engrossed in their conversation to notice anything amiss in the classroom. With his part done, Harry kept his ear out for the conversation between Karkaroff and Snape. You know what this means, Severus. He is coming back. What are we going to do? Karkaroff sounded desperate, as if his days were numbered. "There is no we here, Karkaroff. I've made arrangements for myself," Snape said, his dry tone capable of taking the last drop of water from a dry desert. "Don't you fear him?" Karkaroff asked incredulously. Snape suddenly stopped and turned around sharply with a thunderous expression. "Potter! Get out!" Snape snapped. Harry didn't raise any protest and made his way out of the classroom. He was quite happy to be away from the Death Eater duo. Whatever they were about to discuss didn't bother him. After all, he knew more than what they knew by this point. Last but not least, he got what he wanted from the detention. Harry palmed the 6th-year potions book safely tucked inside his cloak and smirked as he made his way through the halls of Hogwarts. There was more work to be done and plans to be made. It was now time to step up his training. Chapter 37, Down the Rabbit Hole. Harry ducked under the hail of disarming charms and fired off a blast of fire using the Incendio spell. His fire was parted in the middle by a counterspell and it split away from his target. The fire twisted and turned before coalescing behind his target's back. "Oh!" Harry muttered as the fire twisted into a huge ball and rushed straight for him. "Okay. Here goes nothing," he muttered and began concentrating on the new spell he picked up from one of Slytherin's books. Placing his wand diagonally against his palm, he envisioned the rapid twisting of air. Expugno. A miniature twister formed over his left palm and began picking up speed. Pumping more juice into the spell, Harry pushed his palm outward. The miniature twister suddenly grew into a giant lance of storm that rushed out of his open palm. It batted away the fire and struck the hastily put up shield of his target. The lance of wind speared into the shield and began grinding against its surface. It only took 5 seconds before the shield shattered like glass and his spell found its mark. The target was thrown off violently to the other end of the dueling hall. There was a loud crash and wood splintered in every direction. "Phew! I finally got you, you stupid piece of wood," Harry crowed as he celebrated his victory over the dueling dummy provided by the Room of Requirement. Of course, the dummy quickly reformed and sat quietly in the corner. But Harry was not ready for another magical bout. He has been going at it for half an hour straight. He needed some relaxing time. With that in mind, Harry pushed open a door and entered the room with the pool in it. Suddenly, a plate hovered near his eye level with a glass of orange juice and a packet of cigarettes. "Thanks, Dobby. You even managed to get my favorite pack as well." "Nice," said Harry, before he drained the juice. After that, Harry put a cigarette in his mouth. It lit up with a snap of Dobby's finger. "Thanks, Dobby," he said, after taking a drag of the smoke. "Master Harry Potter, sir, should not use smoky." "It'd be bad for you, sir," said Dobby in his usual squeaky voice. Harry smiled and patted Dobby's head affectionately. "You are a good friend, Dobby." "But I'll be fine. There are cleansing rituals that should wipe out any carbon residue from my lungs," said Harry. He took a few more drags before vanishing the cigarette and jumping into the pool. As Harry began backpedaling, he looked at Dobby, who looked like he wanted to say something. "Do you want to say something, Dobby?" asked Harry. "Oh yes, sir." Dobby found what Master Harry Potter, sir, has been looking for. Now that made Harry curious. "What do you mean, Dobby?" he asked, stopping his swimming. "Well, sir." Dobby couldn't help but notice Harry Potter, sir's plan in the nasty snakey's home, sir, said Dobby while snapping his fingers. The sound of the snap echoed in the room and 4 huge metal crates fell beside Dobby with a loud thud. Just a look at the crates keyed in on what Dobby was talking about. "Oh, Dobby. What have you done?" Harry rubbed his face as he looked inside the crate. As he feared, Dobby went ahead and stole the essential equipment he needed for executing one of the plans for the 3rd task. "Is Harry Potter, sir, not happy with Dobby, sir?" asked Dobby, his large green tennis ball eyes staring at Harry. "No, Dobby. But, in the future, always ask me before acting on my plans, all right?" "Dobby will do that, sir," said Dobby, flattening his ears sadly. "Tell me, Dobby. Did you manage to evade the security? Harry asked, fearing the need for some cleanup. He hadn't gone ahead with this plan because he needed to master the memory charm in case of any risky elements in the mission. Dobby did, sir. Dobby sneaked in and made everyone sleep, sir. He also took care of those pesky camis, sir, said Dobby, excitedly hopping from one leg to the other. Camis? Oh, you mean cameras? Yes, those, sir. Dobby made them go poof. Dobby's colorful vocabulary aside, this was no laughing matter. Exactly how did you do that? He asked curiously. Dobby just vanished them for a time, sir. After Dobby took what Harry Potter sir wanted, he restored the camis. Are you sure no one saw you, Dobby? Oh yes, sir. Dobby was invisible, sir. Harry let out a sigh of relief. He took a look at the contents of the crate once more before closing it down. He was sure the warehouse manager was going to be in a heap of trouble when they find these crates missing. There was nothing he could do about it. One man's victory is another man's defeat. It is a cosmic law. One has to die for another to flourish. Similarly, the old system and its enablers have to die for the young to flourish. It seems Plan B is the way to go. Harry muttered, as he closed the crates. Dobby, take these crates to the chamber. Harry ordered. As Dobby disappeared with the crates, Harry let out a sigh. The path forward was now clear. There was going to be a lot of work, but Harry believed he could pull this off. It'd have been easy if there was a way to trap Voldemort's spirit. Harry thought as he jumped back into the pool. He was still reading up on the topic of Horcruxes. If there is a way to trap a split soul, he'd use it on a dime. Until then, he'd be working under the assumption that Voldemort is impossible to kill or imprison. Well, not exactly impossible to kill, Harry thought. It was then Harry had an epiphany. Ravenclaw's diadem. A moment later, Harry stood outside the room of requirement, pacing back and forth with one thought in his mind. I need the room of hidden things. Harry repeated over and over in his mind until a door materialized on his third pass. Stepping into the room, Harry was greeted by towering walls of objects left by previous students. Accio Ravenclaw's diadem. Harry waited a moment, but nothing happened. Anti-summoning jinx. That dark bastard has to make this more complicated. Harry muttered as he began searching for the tiara of Rowena Ravenclaw the old-fashioned way. It was near a statue of some sort. This he knew. The vanishing cabinet was also supposed to be nearby, so he searched for the cabinet first. It took him nearly half an hour to wade through all the junk. He passed by old books, broken chairs, some leaking quills, and even a few axes and polearms. Aha! Harry cried as he found the vanishing cabinet. It was covered with cobwebs and it looked like it was almost ready to fall apart. You are somewhere around here, aren't you? Harry muttered as he looked around for a statue of some sort. No such luck. So, he resumed his search, but it yielded no results. Time was slipping by and he was getting frustrated. He nearly abandoned the attempt, but then Harry thought of a risky idea. Standing still and closing his eyes, Harry concentrated his magic outward so that his senses could reach out beyond the limits of his body. All his senses shut down except for the sense his magic provided him. With his magic as the metaphysical extended hand, he reached out to the surroundings. For nearly 5 minutes, he continued the process until finally, he felt the presence of a malevolent power within his sensory turf. Opening his eyes, Harry rushed towards the source of malevolence. And there it was, the old tiara. Sitting innocently on a wooden box near a stone sculpture of a wizard. The blue gem on the tiara gleamed in the darkness. The closer Harry got to the tiara, the urge to place it on his head surged. I could become super smart. I could destroy Voldemort easily with a little more wisdom. I could learn everything about magic and become the most powerful sorcerer in the world. The temptation was strong. Who wouldn't want to become the most powerful being in the world? More power means more freedom. More freedom means more comfort. Greater the comfort, greater the pleasure. Pleasure was the ultimate pursuit of all. Without pleasure, there was no point in life. One might as well be dead without some kind of pleasure in life. What a price! Harry whispered, looking at the tiara. The more he spent time looking at the tiara, the more beautiful and powerful it felt. But in the end, he pocketed the tiara in a bottomless moleskin pouch. I'll extract pleasure out of this world on my terms. I don't need a tiara with 1/6 of a soul as a crutch, Harry declared before he made himself scarce. Harry had the diadem secured in a bottomless moleskin pouch and locked it away in a cupboard inside the chamber. Slytherin's chamber would hold the diadem till he was prepared to safely dispatch the Horcrux. Besides, there was one more Horcrux within his reach. Slytherin's locket should be safely tucked away in Grimmauld Place. Having the locket in his hand should be a priority, especially considering the risks involved in the third task. After securing the diadem, Harry decided it was time to pay a visit to the library. He had some books to return. However, Harry froze when he stepped outside the chamber's entrance as he came face to face with the Ravenclaw Tower's ghost. She looked like she was about to say something but then paused. The ghost of Helena Ravenclaw turned away from him and floated away without saying a word. Regaining his bearings, Harry ran after the ghost. Wait! He picked up speed, but he was nowhere near fast enough to catch a ghost. He turned a corner and the ghost of Helena Ravenclaw was nowhere to be seen. Great! Harry muttered dejectedly as he missed the chance to explain himself to the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw. He felt a bit sorry for her. Even if centuries have passed, the diadem is still the heirloom of one of the greatest witches born in this world. It must have been painful for Helena Ravenclaw to watch helplessly as the diadem was desecrated with Voldemort's vile magic. You seem upset, Harry Potter. Maybe you should take care of those nargles circling your head, said a melodic voice from his back. Quickly turning around, Harry was greeted by a dirty blonde-haired girl with large purple glasses blinking away with odd lights. With one look at her, Harry immediately recognized who it was. Hi. I'm Harry Potter. He introduced himself, offering his hand. Nice to meet you, Harry Potter. I'm Luna Lovegood, said Luna, a vacant smile on her face while shaking his hand. Can I ask you a question, Harry? Sure. Did you happen to see my wand by chance? Asked Luna. Oh. You have your wand on your hair, said Harry, pointing at the piece of wood sticking out of the blonde bun of her hair. Oh. Silly me. Luna tittered as she took the wand from her hair, letting her hair pool over her shoulders. Luna suddenly pointed her wand at his face and made a small clockwise spin. There was a silver light that made Harry close his eyes. There. The nargles won't bother you anymore, Luna said happily. Thanks, I guess. Are you going to the library? I was not, but I can accompany you if you fear the nargles are going to attack you again, Luna offered. Harry looked at the strange girl and smiled. I'd appreciate that, said Harry as he walked beside Luna, and together they made their way towards the library. XXXXXX. It was evening and Harry finally finished the last day of detention with Snape. The greasy git looked unhappy that the detention was over. Over the week, Snape has been looking for any excuse to get an extension for the detentions. Harry was careful not to fall into the trap. There was a Hogsmeade weekend coming and Harry didn't want to miss it because Mr. Personality cannot let go of a grudge against a dead man. He was just about to take the stairs leading out of the dungeons when he came across both Tracy and Daphne. Hi, Harry. Finished with Snape? Asked Tracy. Yep. There was an awkward silence between them as Tracy silently urged someone to speak. Harry was not taking the bait here. He was quite familiar with this kind of situation. If he opened his mouth now, he'd be the one to end up saying an apology even though he did no wrong. Well, Daphne has something to say, said Tracy, before she pushed Daphne towards Harry. I didn't like it when you kissed Delacour. Correction. Harry raised a finger in protest. She kissed me. Well, I didn't see you complaining, Daphne snapped back. That's because my mouth was otherwise engaged. He deadpanned. Daphne looked like she was about to spew out hellfire. Thankfully, Tracy chose to intervene. "Can you both just set aside your attitudes for a moment?" Tracy snapped before rounding on her friend. Harry remained a silent spectator as the two Slytherins conversed under their breaths for a moment before facing him once more. "I'd like it if you accompany me to Hogsmeade tomorrow. No politics, no deals, and no meetings. Just you and me," Daphne offered, her cheeks burning red as she gazed at Harry for an answer. Harry remained silent for a moment before nodding in agreement. "I'd like that," said Harry. Harry left the two Slytherins in the dungeons. Daphne was understandably thrilled. He could read that in her eyes, but Harry was anything but thrilled. By choosing to go ahead with this date, he knew he was cheating on some level. "Or I could come clean with Fleur," he thought as he made his way to the Gryffindor Tower. The internal struggle that he was going through made him blind to his surroundings. So, when he was pulled into a broom closet, he was surprised. Moreover, he was paralyzed enough to not react in any way. Fortunately, it was not someone hostile. Fleur. He barely uttered her name before a pair of warm lips engulfed his own in a sensual tango. Hostile, his mind went blank except for the pleasure of Fleur's body pressing against him in the confined space. It became incredibly hot and he was slowly succumbing to the allure of Fleur. "No! Snap out of it!" Harry slowly regained a hold on his emotions and with great reluctance, he pulled back from Fleur's pouty lips. "Harry?" Fleur inquired, her melodic voice caressing his ears. "I have to tell you something." Harry began narrating the events involving Daphne and Tracy. When he was finished, he waited for the inevitable end of his budding relationship with Fleur. In the end, he was unwilling to lie to Fleur. For some reason, it didn't sit well with him to cheat on Fleur, not to mention she'd have eventually found out about his date with Daphne. Nothing can hardly remain a secret at Hogwarts, especially when he was about to go out with Daphne to Hogsmeade. But all of that came crashing down when Fleur gave him an unexpected reply. "I don't mind." "What?" Harry reared back in surprise. "More kissing and less talking, Harry," said Fleur, sneaking her fingers underneath his shirt, scratching at his abs while kissing him. This is an interesting development, thought Harry, engaging in a heated make-out session with Fleur. All worries fled his mind as Fleur deepened the kiss by drawing him in. Under such a situation, he could only do one thing. His left arm snaked around Fleur's waist, batting away her cloak, while his right hand settled on the back of her neck, taking her silky hair between his fingers. Gasping for breath, they separated. Harry could see the lust shining in Fleur's sapphire eyes. He assumed she could see the same in his eyes. "Ari!" Fleur moaned, as she took his head into her hands and kissed him deeply. One of her legs climbed up and Harry on instinct took her up by her ass. When they broke up for air once, both of them were left panting for air. "This is not safe," Harry mumbled half-heartedly. "I agree," said Fleur. "We need another place." "But that's not what I meant," Harry silently said in his mind, but he dared not air that thought out. "I know a place," said Harry. The moment he said that, he knew there was no turning back now. The sunny smile gracing Fleur's face made him forget all his inhibitions, and he was rewarded with another soul-searing kiss for his efforts. Chapter 38, A Better Date. The Daily Prophet was sporting a lovely picture of Dolores Umbridge on the front page. The woman was seen posing for the camera outside Barty Crouch's home with her wand raised in some sort of supposed raid. Of course, she found nothing on the premises except some parchments and dust. Percy Weasley could also be seen standing beside the woman, looking lost and perhaps a tad bit let down by all the negative press his boss was getting. Umbridge, being the leading chair in the committee assigned to oversee the investigation into Crouch for his misuse of power, seems to be quite happy. Harry supposed the woman enjoyed wrecking other people's lives. It had explained the bubbly person she was putting forward while making a show of investigating Crouch. After all, if the woman really wanted to be efficient, she could have just assigned a few Aurors on the job. Instead, the pink demon was doing photo ops to stroke her vanity and ego. What a bunch of useless cretins, Harry muttered as he folded the Daily Prophet and handed it over to Katie Bell. Disappointed to learn there is no sign of Crouch anywhere, asked Katie, taking this copy of The Prophet happily and going straight for the sports page. I was expecting to be disappointed. So, no surprises there. I just don't like to see that overgrown pink toad first thing in the morning, said Harry, scooping a spoonful of jelly into his mouth. Look at you being all grumpy. You didn't sleep well last night? Asked Katie. I manage. Harry said, shrugging his shoulders. As a matter of fact, he was indeed engaged in other activities. Just learning spells from a book doesn't make you an expert in them. The key to becoming a powerful wizard lies in practice. Spells are a combination of imagination, will and magical power. These three constraints have to align perfectly to produce the desired result from a spell. The only way to get said perfect result is through practice. Through regular practice, the mind and the body get more familiar with the spell and it gets easier to cast as time passes by. Of course, occlumency helped because a disciplined mind helps in empowering a spell. But lately, his occlumency has been suffering some setbacks and it was all thanks to Fleur. Usually, he had practiced the mind arts during bedtime just before sleep, but nowadays his mind was distracted by provocative imageries. Harry blamed the hormones, and it certainly doesn't help Fleur tend to jump on him in the hallways. Pulling him into heated make-out sessions in the many broom closets of Hogwarts was becoming a hobby of the French witch. Having someone as hot as Fleur in a closed confined space with their bodies rubbing against each other has sort of made him incapable of sleep. A better part of his bedtime was now spent on fantasizing about Fleur, which naturally made his occlumency training non-existent. With his mind and body succumbing to lust, he was left with only two options. One was to depend on his hand to do the job, and the other was to abandon sleep altogether by training himself to exhaustion. In the end, Harry took turns on both options to pull him through the nights. This left him grumpy and exhausted in the mornings. To make matters worse, he was no longer under the potion regimen of Madame Pomfrey. The resident nurse was quite satisfied with his growth spurt this year and subsequently cut him off from further supplementary medication, saying that he was on the right track of growth. His body has to cope with the loss of extra energy provided by the potions, which turned out to be a blow in the current situation. So, all in all, he was quite grumpy in the mornings. Hey, cheer up, Harry. After all, there will be no classes today, and if the grapevine is true, you have a date with Greengrass, said Katie, patting him on the shoulder trying to cheer him up. Being reminded of the date only made him groan and put his head on the table. With all that was happening with Fleur, the constant magical training and his own pet projects with regard to the third task, he was not exactly in the mood for a date with Daphne. But he couldn't afford to let go of a potential ally in this game of snakes and ladders. He rolled the dice and he was offered the chance to climb his way into Damian Greengrass' confidence. Daphne, he realized, was a valuable ladder for his ascension into the higher echelons of the Pure Blood Society. Keeping her friendly for now remained a priority until he could build a power base using his resources. This is why he was quite surprised by Fleur's indifference to his date with Daphne. He could not fathom why Fleur would shrug away the whole matter if he was interested in him. He was quite sure he read the signals right with regards to Fleur. She was most assuredly interested in him as he was interested in her. So, why? The answer eluded him. Why the long face? Having trouble with handling a snake? Asked Katie, her eyes crinkling with amusement. Something like that. Harry mumbled distractedly, as he tried to catch a glimpse of Fleur at the Ravenclaw table to no effect. This coming from a snake charmer. Oh, the irony. Katie laughed at his expense. Hey, Katie. Can I ask you something? Shoot. Hypothetically, consider a girl asks a guy to date another girl while they are in a relationship. What does that say about the girl? Hypothetically? Katie asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes. Harry nodded. I'd say your hypothetical girl isn't interested in pursuing a relationship where she is so confident that the other girl can't hold a candle compared to her, said Katie. Ha! That makes a lot of sense. Harry mumbled. Don't tell me Greengrass asked you to date another girl. What? No. Daphne never said anything like that. It took Harry quite a lot of effort to shimmy out of the hole he dug himself. The only silver line was that Katie agreed to not bring up the matter again. The last thing he wanted was for the Hogwarts rumor mill to get wind of this, which would put him under greater scrutiny. Krum and Hermione's tragic love story has been the hot topic in Hogwarts for the last few days. He was keen to keep it that way as the duo kept the attention off his back. XXXXXXX. It became quite clear summer was fast approaching. The air was far warmer than the last time Harry visited Hogsmeade. He was sitting on a bench near the fountain waiting for Daphne. This time he decided to go full Muggle by foregoing the cloak. He was in a pair of simple black jeans, a blue t-shirt and a black jacket. A strong gust of wind wrecked any sort of success he had in taming his unruly hair. He waited patiently as some Slytherin seniors began coming out of Hogwarts with Filch scanning everyone hawkishly. Funnily enough, he got some friendly greetings from some Slytherins. Most of them were from his ritual partners. He had so far kept them at an arm's length after he found out about their cause of addiction. But, now that they have returned to normal, he thought to reconsider his earlier approach. Having more contacts in the Slytherin house ought to be advantageous. Depending solely on Daphne and Tracy would only be detrimental to his plans in the long run. Perhaps I should start with Barbara Collins, Harry thought. The sixth-year Slytherin which was friendly during the ritual days. She was also rumored to be a runes prodigy. Perhaps he could let Collins in on his latest project. While Barbara Collins is certainly not part of any great pureblood families of Britain, she was still a pureblood, and having a friend in her should help him enter other pureblood social circles. Suddenly a pair of bright brown eyes were before him, making Harry reel back. "What are you thinking up in that little head of yours, Harry?" asked Tracy, withdrawing from Harry's personal space. "Just some stuff," Harry answered lamely as he climbed to his feet. "Whatever it is, I suggest you put it out of your mind," Tracy said, before she pushed Daphne forward until her friend was level with Harry. "Stop it," Daphne hissed, but it didn't dissuade Tracy one bit. "My work here is done and you two do whatever it is you want to do. I have some new quills to look for." With that parting shot, Tracy skipped away, leaving Daphne in his company. "So, what do you want to do first?" Harry asked, offering his arm, which Daphne took after a bit of hesitance. "Honeydukes," came the swift reply from Daphne, making Harry stare curiously at her. "What?" "I'm low on my chocolate stash," Daphne said, defensively. "I'm not judging. I'm just surprised you have a sweet tooth, that's all." A few minutes later, he was sitting in Honeydukes with several sickle lighter in his pockets. Somehow, he ended up buying Daphne's stash of sweets as an apology. Exactly how she talked him into it is still a mystery, especially when he was insisting the whole time he did no wrong. This was why girls are scary. They have the uncanny ability to pin blame on their male counterparts. It was certainly a scary ability, and an enviable one as well. "I never asked. How's Sirius doing now that he is free?" Daphne asked curiously. "He's doing fine except for some complaints about his mother's portrait being a headache," said Harry, taking occasional sips from the cup of hot chocolate in his hand. "It must have been hard for him to return back home with almost everyone in the Black family being dead and all," said Daphne. He never gave that little detail much thought. But, now that Daphne brought it up, Harry thought about Sirius' future. With everything the man went through for more than a decade, surely Sirius deserved some happiness and stability in his life. Sirius lost everyone except Andromeda from his family's side, leaving him alone as the last Black. Perhaps I should push Sirius to have a family of his own, Harry thought. But that thought quickly made him freeze and put more scrutiny on Daphne. Harry suspected an ulterior motive behind this line of conversation. It was no secret that Sirius was now probably one of the richest wizards in Britain. It'd be quite natural for people to get interested in bagging Sirius. Even though the conversation from then on never strayed to Sirius and instead branched off to the ongoing hunt for Crouch, Harry remained on edge from then on. So, it was to his relief when Tracy joined them when they exited Honeydukes. The rest of the time was spent wandering around the village purchasing parchments and whatnot. An hour later, Harry even managed to cajole Neville into the group. Sadly, Hermione was nowhere to be found as she was supposedly on a self-imposed exile from the village owing to her recent bout of popularity. "It's sad Hermione chose not to visit Hogsmeade," said Tracy as they neared the entrance hall. Skeeter painting her out as the modern-day Juliet and Crumma's Romeo did not sit well with her. Wherever she goes, she either gets pitying looks or the usual insults from blood purists. Harry said, climbing the stairs to the entrance. "Juliet and Romeo?" Daphne asked, confused. "Muggle fictional characters. They had a tragic love story," Harry explained. "I don't think Hermione would appreciate that comparison," Neville said. "Probably not," Harry agreed with a shrug. "But that's how Skeeter is portraying her. It's sort of funny." Out of nowhere an owl swooped in and landed on Harry's shoulder. It took all his willpower not to scream in fright. Having a predator of the night sitting a few inches from his eyes was not a welcoming experience. Thankfully, the owl only extended its leg, offering a letter clutched between its claws. The moment Harry took the letter, the owl took to the sky with several strong flaps of its wings. There was no address outside the cover, so he was in no rush to open the letter. After saying his goodbyes to everyone, he went straight to the room of requirement. On the way, Harry broke the cover of the letter after a plethora of detection charms revealed no malicious magic. The letter inside was written in French, but it changed into English after a second. The letter only contained one sentence. "Do you want a real date?" The parchment flashed theatrically before disappearing into bright blue vapor. "That's some nice piece of charm work," Harry commented aloud. There was tinkling laughter in the corridor from his back. Harry turned around to see Fleur coming out of a disillusion charm. "You didn't answer, Harry?" Fleur asked, a coy smile on her lips. Harry strode forward and pulled Fleur into his arms before their lips engaged in a tango. Breaking away, Harry smiled as he looked into her clear sapphire eyes. "What have you planned?" A few minutes later, Harry was overlooking the green hills surrounding Hogwarts from the wooden bridge. The constant gales of wind rustled his hair as he stood there on the wooden bridge with Fleur nuzzling his neck. "This is a better date," Harry admitted. "Of course it is," said Fleur, slapping him painfully on the shoulder as if anything else could have happened. Harry looked around and appreciated the spatial magic Fleur had performed, keeping them away from any prying eyes. Not that there were any on the bridge. Most Hogwarts students tend to avoid the bridge for some reason. Still, Fleur used the charm to ward them off from any prying eyes by creating a private bubble of space. "This is an impressive piece of magic," Harry admitted. "Finally admitting Beauxbatons is better than Hogwarts?" Fleur asked playfully. Harry laughed at her pride directed at her school. "Maybe you have better magical education at your school, but this castle can surprise you," said Harry. "Then surprise me, Harry," Fleur whispered into his ear, sending shivers down his spine. "It's a bet then." "Winner gets whatever they wish," he suggested. Fleur showed her agreement by pulling Harry into another snogging session, which he was quite happy to comply. His mind went completely blank as Fleur began kissing him deeply, and this time her tongue prodded against his lips. He welcomed her tongue in and they made out, forgetting everything else at the moment. Suddenly, Fleur broke off the kiss, letting out a moan. Harry was faced with a pair of accusing eyes, and that's when he realized his right hand was now on her buttocks. "Sorry," Harry muttered, hastily pulling his hands back only to be stopped by Fleur. Fleur placed his hand back where it was a moment ago before she kissed him again. Harry was never the merrier. Chapter 39, A Ghostly Advice. Harry observed his ancient runes professor closely. He had presented a summary of his second project for Professor Babbling's approval. But, instead of being mightily impressed and immediately approving the project, Professor Babbling looked rather disinterested in his project idea. "Mr. Potter, your idea for this project is rejected. I suggest that you focus on improving your first project," Professor Babbling said, pushing the parchment in his direction, making Harry frown. "But, why? My idea is feasible and..." Harry started but was swiftly cut off by Professor Babbling. It is a brilliant idea, Potter. Professor Babbling admitted, making Harry blink owlishly. But, then why? He asked. Because the idea you have presented before me is too dangerous to experiment on, and I'll tell you why. You want to use runes to mimic the effects of Polyjuice Potion. Exactly how are you going to apply the runes? Are you thinking of carving the runes on flesh? Because, that is human transmutation and it will land you in Azkaban, Mr. Potter. No. No, you've misinterpreted the project, Professor. I don't want to carve runes into the flesh. Rather, I want the runes carved on a necklace, and the necklace can make a physical change when a hair or a drop of blood is inducted. Harry explained, but it didn't seem to impress the professor at all. You will not use runes to change the flesh, Potter. That is against the law and it is quite dangerous to do so. What have I taught you from day one? Ancient runes is a mix of languages that absorb raw magic to impose a wizard's will upon the world. You absolutely will not and should not use runes to make changes to a living body. It is illegal and most importantly it might end up corrupting your magic. Corrupting my magic? How is that possible? Harry asked, finding this bit of detail interesting. Tell me something, Mr. Potter. Where do you think magic comes from? Harry was a bit taken aback by the question. The soul? Harry answered tentatively. If that was the case, then Muggles would have also been able to cast magic. Professor Babbling deadpanned, looking at him as if he was a slow chimp. Let me enlighten you, Mr. Potter. Magic comes from three sources for a wizard. There is old magic, the magic that is extracted from nature. Wizards used to power their spells using old magic with the help of a staff. Second, as you said, there is the magic of the soul. The third and most importantly, there is the magic that we are born with. It is inside our body. Do you know where? Harry shook his head no. Professor Babbling stood up from her seat and walked around her table. She came to a stop behind him and poked his spine with the tip of her wand. There was a sudden jolt traveling from the base of his spine all the way to his head. This is where our magic comes from, Mr. Potter. The Eastern wizards call it coiled divine power. Your magical power that has been inherited from your family is right there. This is the part of your body that determines your power and your destiny in magic. Having said that, Professor Babbling turned Harry around so that he was looking into her onyx eyes. Now tell me, Potter. Is it a good idea to use experimental runes that can absorb large amounts of natural magic to change your physical body? Harry hesitated but muttered a half-hearted no under the glaring eyes of his ancient runes professor. After you have graduated from Hogwarts and studied various disciplines of magic for long years, then if you are interested in pursuing this project, you can go ahead. So long as you are studying at Hogwarts and I'm your runes professor, you won't even think of doing something like this again. Am I understood? Yes. Harry muttered dejectedly. But he was not going to give up so easily. I have another idea, Professor. The door of Professor Babbling's office closed on his face with a bang. She could have been a bit nicer. Harry muttered before taking his leave from Professor Babbling's office. Even if his first project idea didn't pan out so well, the second one was sort of accepted. His second idea was to formulate a runic cluster capable of converting magical energy into electrical energy and thereby make it possible for Muggle electronics to function. However, he was surprised to learn from Professor Babbling that such a runic cluster already exists. In hindsight, Harry realized he should have made proper inquiries before approaching Professor Babbling with the idea. The answer was right in front of him all the time. The Wizarding wireless network worked using the runic cluster he was trying to reinvent. The only Muggle technology that got fried in the presence of magic was those with chips and circuit boards. It was there he needed to work on, not on converting magical energy into electrical energy. But, in the context of his third task, Harry only needed the latter runic cluster for his plan to work seamlessly. The slip of paper in his hand contained the permission slip from Professor Babbling to take out a book from the restricted section. That book should give him the proper tool to plan out some finer aspects concerning the third task. Library, here I come. XXXXXXXX. Classes in March passed away at a brisk pace. Maybe that was his personal experience because he didn't have to worry about the end-of-the-year exams. Being a Triwizard champion sort of insulated him from this yearly event. Nonetheless, there was no shortage of assignments. In fact, Snape has been particularly enthusiastic in assigning extra assignments for Harry in the form of long essays supposedly to keep something useful in his brain. Snape's heartfelt attempts at dumping misery on his head aside, Harry was having a productive month so far. Thanks to Professor Babbling, Harry had to revise his plan for the third task. Taking the cup was the easy part. The most dangerous part lies in what comes after. There was no way that he could allow Voldemort access to his blood. Of course, there was a slim chance that he could potentially screw up the ritual by giving his blood willingly. However, the issue was he had no idea whether that'd necessarily have any adverse effect on Voldemort. It's also possible that he might also become a willing participant in a faulty dark ritual. The consequences of such a situation could be unfathomable. Everything becomes unpredictable when dark magic is involved. What he really needs was an expert in the field of dark magic and rituals. There were quite a few experts in Hogwarts, but he could not afford to ask for their opinion. All of them were aligned with Dumbledore in some way. The last thing he wanted was for Dumbledore to get wind of any of his plans. This left him in a bind. At least, Professor Babbling did end up directing him to solve one portion of his plan. There was of course more work to be done, but he was confident he could achieve his target. The runic physical transformation was something he was banking on, and now that he knew it was not a viable plan, to begin with, he was in need of another method to secure his blood. Insofar, the answer to this dilemma eluded him. "You look like you are trying to set the pot on fire with your eyes," Neville commented. Harry glanced at his partner in herbology class. Neville was not exactly his partner, but rather he had teamed up with Neville to pour loads of dragon dung for preparing the pots. "Just thinking about something," Harry murmured, getting back to the task at hand. Fastening his dragonhide gloves, Harry gathered dragon dung in his hands before pouring it into the pot. After dusting off any remains into the pot, he went for a small vial of viscous green liquid. It was the growth potion that accelerated the growth of magical plants. Uncorking the vial, he poured the potion into the pot, after which he covered the whole thing under a pile of soil. "Here." Neville pushed a bowl of water in his direction with some floating seeds of dittany in it. Harry poured the water into the pot and the shrubs began to sprout out of the pot at a rapid pace. "Very good, Mr. Potter, Mr. Longbottom. Now, harvest the leaves and store them away in the cabinet," Professor Sprout said, as she was passing by. He let out a sigh and began harvesting the leaves. "You know, Harry, there are dark circles under your eyes. You need to sleep more often instead of sneaking out of our dorm and doing whatever it is you are doing," said Neville. Harry's eyes widened in surprise as he rounded on Neville. "You know about that? How?" "Harry, your bed is just 3 feet away from me. Did you really think someone wouldn't notice your bed is empty someday?" Neville asked. "Damn. I'm slipping up," Harry muttered. "Are you sneaking out to train for the third task?" Harry looked at Neville and just nodded. "You need to cut back on your training time, Harry. At this rate, you will be too exhausted to do anything when the time comes," said Neville. "I appreciate the concern, Neville," Harry said, clapping Neville on his shoulder. Of course, he never gave the advice any serious consideration. He was back to training when the night came knocking. While Neville may have good intentions, he could not afford to let time slip by. On the next day early morning, Harry was about to walk to the Great Hall when he noticed Hermione sitting in a corner of the common room with a bunch of letters on her lap. Hermione's frizzled hair and her untidy dress indicated that she has been here for a long time. "That's an awful lot of letters," Harry tentatively commented as he sat beside her on the couch. Seeing that Hermione was not responding, he took a sneak peek at the letter in her hand. "Don't fall for the false promises of the purebloods. They are poisonous snakes filled with hatred for our kind." Wow. That's one way to give life-changing advice in a letter. Harry commented. Most of the letters I received were like that. Makes me wonder what sort of life Muggleborns have in the wizarding world. Hermione muttered, her eyes flashing darkly as she took another letter. Do you really want to read all those letters first thing in the morning? It's no wonder you've been a bit withdrawn for the last couple of days. Don't mind me, Harry. You go ahead, said Hermione before going back to reading her mail. Harry looked at his watch and saw there was an hour before breakfast. Usually, his free time in the morning was spent in secrecy with Fleur, but lately, she has been rather busy with her schoolwork. It was her last year of schooling and she was supposed to take the equivalent of Newts in France this summer. This left her otherwise engaged and that left Harry with nothing to do. But, Harry was not willing to waste time by lazing around. So, he made his way straight to the room of requirement and began to practice some of the more shady spells he found from the books Sirius loaned. Since his magical training was rather focused on elemental magic, his repository of spells was rather limited. Sure, he got a good handle on some curses, but the elements of water, air, and fire were his go-to offensive spells. But that won't do in the coming years. Voldemort and his Death Eaters won't be using parlor tricks in their war. Dumbledore's idea of using love against dark magic would only increase more graves in Britain. He had no intention to depend on sheer luck to survive the coming war. If a war was coming, he'd rather face it with the best weapons in his arsenal. Looking at the training dummy at the other end of the room, Harry gathered the necessary emotion behind the spell he was about to use. I need to cut off the head. He repeated this thought like a mantra in his mind over and over until he could feel the killing intent building within him. Harry slashed his wand sharply through the air, looking at the dummy on the other side. Sectum sempra. The severed head of the dummy fell on the floor with a thud. Not only did the dummy's head fall off clean, he could also make out an outline of the cut on the wall behind the dummy. Nice. On the first try. Voldemort is going to be so sorry, said Harry, grinning wickedly at the thought of cutting up Voldemort's head. You tread on a dangerous path, Harry Potter. Harry turned around quickly in surprise with his wand raised to see the ghostly apparition of Helena Ravenclaw. Hi, he waved hesitantly. Do you know why dark magic is so addictive, Harry Potter? Asked Helena, out of the blue. Snapping out of the shock of seeing the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower, Harry tentatively answered, keeping in mind that he was treading on dangerous ground. He could not afford to offend Helena Ravenclaw. The chance of her tattling on him to a Hogwarts staff would have catastrophic effects. Because it is powerful. No, Harry Potter. It is because of the emotions used to fuel dark spells. Anger, hate, despair, anguish, pain, the intent to kill. They all come easy to a wizard because it is easy to hate someone. It is easy to wish pain upon someone. It is easy to wish death upon someone, said Helena, floating towards him, staring perhaps a tad earnestly in his opinion. He might have been mistaken because when he blinked, Helena was staring coldly down at him. Nobody can win a war without spilling blood. Harry said, looking curiously to see any reaction from Helena, but the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw remained unmoved. Dark magic, if left unchecked, will infect you whole and leave you a hollow shell, Harry Potter. Do not think you are somehow exempt from the laws of magic. If you wish harm upon another creature, then you have opened yourself to a world of harm to befall upon you. Those who raise the sword shall also die by the sword. Keep this in mind. After saying her piece, Helena turned away from Harry as if to take her leave. Wait. Don't you want to ask me what I'm going to do with the diadem? Harry suddenly asked, even though he found it odd for Helena Ravenclaw of all people to give him advice. What are you going to do with my mother's diadem? Helena asked, without turning around. I'm going to destroy it. Good. Helena whispered as she disappeared through the walls of the room of requirement, leaving Harry totally bewildered. That was strange. Harry muttered. He stared at the wall through which Helena Ravenclaw disappeared for a minute before returning to the task at hand. However, he kept the warning Helena gave about dark magic in his mind. He could even see the inherent weakness in overusing negative emotions like anger and hate. Maybe what I need is to balance out the emotions. Some training with the Patronus charm should be enough. Harry thought, before he went back to the training. Chapter 40, The Maze. It was quite fascinating to watch the nifflers Hagrid brought for the class digging through the soil. Even if these nifflers were nearly the same size as a mouse, they were certainly far more powerful thanks to their innate magic. They dug through the ground within seconds even though they have paws the size of a twig. Fascinating creatures, aren't they? Said Hagrid, eyes alight with joy seeing the class was suitably enthralled by the latest creature after the unicorns. Harry could hear some girls complaining in the background about not having unicorns for this class. Girls! Harry thought, rolling his eyes. Cute little creatures, nifflers. If they like ya, they'll follow ya around like good pets. But, they are natural hunters for anything shiny, said Hagrid jovially. Hagrid pointed at the nifflers jumping from one student after the other, nicking watches, hairpins, pouches of galleons and anything shiny that caught their fancy. Harry found a few were ready to jump onto the side where Gryffindor students were hanging around. While it'd be fun to watch the nifflers work their magic on all of them, Harry was not willing to part with his stuff. So, he took out his wand and acted Immobulus. The bunch of nifflers going to jump to their new victims found themselves floating in the air as Harry's spell took effect. They were essentially bound by his spell to not make a move, and his intent conveyed to act only against the nifflers. After all, he didn't want to accidentally immobilize the whole class. I should have warned ya. They're dab hands in finding treasures. Obsessed with them, I'd say, said Hagrid, as he collected the small beady-eyed creatures who were looking at Harry with watery eyes. It looked as though they were tearing up for being denied the chance to rob everyone of their possessions. Hagrid was suddenly there, plucking the nifflers out of the animated suspension and began shaking them down out of the things the nifflers took from everyone. Some of them tried to leap out of Hagrid's hand to retrieve their loot, but to no avail. Well, they might be expert thieves, but they are cute as a button, said Seamus, a sentiment shared by Harry and many others. They're a bit excited, that's all, said Hagrid, collecting the wayward nifflers. Hagrid began listing off the pros and cons of having nifflers around. Apparently, the cute little buggers have no sense of when to stop their thieving ways. Even if they are domesticated in a wizard's house, they end up ransacking the house for anything valuable. This made them undesirable as a pet like an owl or a cat, even though they are cuddly and cute. A dozen of these guys can have the goblins run out of their business, said Dean, laughing amusedly as the nifflers looked forlornly at the treasure they stole being returned to their owners. All right, everyone. Drop your nifflers into the cage, said Hagrid, going around each student and securing the nifflers. Most of them were reluctant to hand over the little creature even though they were expert thieves. Hagrid had to promise everyone that he'd keep the nifflers in the next lesson as well. It seems Hagrid is doing quite all right. You did well in lesson planning. Maybe you can one day become a professor at Hogwarts, Harry said, complimenting Hermione, who blushed at the praise. Oh, I don't know. What about you, Harry? What would you like to do after Hogwarts? Asked Hermione as they made their way towards the castle as Hagrid's class was over. Harry eyed his friend with a knowing smile. Her attempts at shifting the focus on him did not go unnoticed. I suppose I'm a bit interested in starting a business of some sort, Harry said. Business? Hermione sounded surprised. What sort of business? Maybe a toy store or something. I'm not exactly sure. All I know is that I don't want to work under someone. I'd rather be an entrepreneur who creates jobs, said Harry, after some amount of thought. Ha! That's a mature way of thinking, Harry. I never realized you were interested in starting a business of your own, said Hermione. So, what is it that you hope to do after Hogwarts? Asked Harry, bringing the focus of the conversation back on Hermione. Maybe I should try my luck in politics. Hermione muttered. Politics? Don't tell me this is about those letters you've been receiving? Harry asked. I never knew Muggleborns were facing so many problems in the wizarding world. Most of them never got any respectful jobs despite their good grades. The Muggleborns abroad have it far worse. You know, Victor says Durmstrang does not even admit any Muggleborns. I want to change all that, and for that, Muggleborns need political representation. Hermione said, her brown eyes shining with the same resolve Harry saw when she launched the house elf movement. Harry thought Hermione was being a bit naive and was viewing the world only from the angle of a victim, forgetting one crucial point. Wizards and witches have always been the victim of Muggle oppression. The statute of secrecy enforced by the Ministry may have its flaws, and this may have given rise to the conservative political tilt in the wizarding world. However, there were legitimate concerns in play to be cautious of Muggleborns. The simple fact is that Muggleborns are just too great a security threat to be given a free pass into the higher echelons of wizarding society. Harry'd go a bit further and say Slytherin's alleged concerns regarding Muggleborn students in Hogwarts were not exactly unwarranted. As someone intimately familiar with the Muggles, Harry was more than aware of the immense danger Muggles posed to the wizarding world. That was probably why the political structure of the Ministry of Magic is designed to keep the Muggleborns out. For the sake of practical reasons, having a voice of Muggleborns in the Ministry would have been sensible, but there was a danger if a war was to break out between Muggles and wizards. All Muggleborns may not necessarily hold attachment to their Muggle roots, but the possibility of such a scenario exists. The distrust wizards hold against Muggles was validated by all the witch burnings and persecution that has been heaped on the wizarding population. That stigma can't be eradicated so easily. Hermione, as usual, did not see the other side of the coin. She only saw the perceived injustice against the Muggleborns. That was why Harry resolved to keep a close eye on Hermione and her correspondence with the Muggleborn diaspora. If she could create Spew, then she could end up creating a Muggleborn liberation front in the near future. At least, you can stop pursuing Rita Skeeter, said Harry. Why? Hermione asked, curiously. It's thanks to Skeeter you got the letters. So, in some way, Skeeter became an instrument in directing you to a different path. Harry pointed out. Ha! Hermione looked shocked for a moment before shaking her head. I don't think I'll be leaving that woman alone. I'll get her back for all the trouble she caused me. XXXXXXXXX. It was a fine evening with comfortable warmth hanging loosely in the air. The last class of the day was unfortunately History of Magic by Professor Binns. For that reason alone, Harry was resting his head on his arms, struggling to not nod off. It was an uphill battle to stay awake when Professor Binns was droning on about goblin and dwarven wars. The only piece of interesting knowledge he garnered from Binns' lecture was that dwarves were the archenemies of goblins and they were concentrated along the Alps. In the old days, goblins and dwarves were in an epic battle spanning continents for supremacy. Both races had fought for supremacy with a long bloody history dating all the way back to the era of the Founders. Perhaps, the Goblin-Dwarven Wars were even older than the Founders, according to Professor Binns. Any historical data beyond the era of the Founders was rather lacking in detail and proof. So, most of the wizarding historical content before the 10th century was rather composed from the perspective of other magical races like goblins, dwarves, Vila, etc. It was quite strange for wizards not to have any historical references beyond the 10th century, especially considering Muggle history is still preserved. It could be possible some of that history was covered up due to political reasons. Muggle political entities during the pagan era most likely had the open participation of wizards and witches. Almost all great civilizations of the world worshipped wizards and other magical creatures as gods and demons. The Ministry would have preferred to keep those details under wraps to not give wizards any ideas about world domination and godhood. Harry snapped out of his musings when Professor Binns announced the class was over. He looked at his notepad to see only a rough sketch of a Niffler instead of any notes. It was a good thing Hermione regularly took notes and her notes were accessible to him. While he wouldn't have to worry about the end-of-the-year exams, the current syllabus covered some portions of the OWL exam. Packing his backpack speedily, Harry was out of the class hoping to get a change of clothes before joining a football game. After that, he needed to pay a visit to the chamber. However, those plans were put on hold by Professor McGonagall, who intercepted him on his way. You are being asked by Mr. Bagman. He expects you to present yourself at the Quidditch pitch at 6. He'll be explaining the third task to all the champions. McGonagall told him. Forced to change his plans, Harry decided to forego the game and go straight for the chamber. Inside Slytherin's lair, Harry's secret weapon was being prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Voldemort. He was still in the dark on how to allow Voldemort's resurrection to go through without using his blood or his active involvement. But other parts of his plans were coming along smooth, in parts thanks to his slight modification of the basic rune cluster suggested by Professor Babbling. Master Harry. Dobby announced his arrival with the signature pop accompanying the teleportation. Dobby. Did you look for what I asked? Dobby did, sir. The locket is in the house, sir, under Nasty Creature's watch, said Dobby. Harry was relieved to hear that. It was good to get confirmation of the Horcrux's location. Now, he just needed to convince Creature to hand over the locket. He had an idea or two to make that happen. But that could wait. Good. What about the other thing I asked of you? Dobby did it, sir. Harry Potter has nothing to worry about, Dobby said, confidently. If everything is in order, then you and Winky can start practicing, said Harry. Dobby does not understand, sir. Harry patted the elf's head with a smile. Come, I'll explain. Let's call Winky as well. She also has a part in this game, said Harry, before calling out to the female elf in his employ. Winky. Harry left a suitably disturbed Dobby in the chamber, struggling to come to terms with what he was required to do. Dobby was a bit queasy about playing his part in the plan, but Winky was wholeheartedly on board when he explained his plan, especially the part where she has a chance to deal some damages to the Death Eaters. Harry had properly managed to guide Winky's negative emotions towards the Death Eaters and Voldemort for corrupting the House of Crouch. This conveniently absolved Winky's conscience and allowed her to forgive herself for any perceived failure she sees on her part. Harry! Fleur called him once he exited the entrance hall. Hey! Harry waved in greeting and moved closer to her. However, he was mindful not to show any overt affection as they were out in the open. You promised me a date, Harry. Did you forget? Fleur asked, a playful smile on her lips. You have been busy. Not anymore, said Fleur, looking expectantly at him. Will you be free this Sunday? Harry asked. Fleur nodded, making Harry's heart leap. I'll allow you the time and place, Harry said, happy to see Fleur agreeing. Harry! Fleur! Both of them turned around to see Cedric approaching them from behind. Thought I was late for whatever it is Mr. Bagman is cooking up. What do you reckon the third task is going to be? Harry shrugged, preferring not to speculate, especially when they were minutes away from finding out. A treasure hunt, Fleur suggested. I certainly hope the task is something like that. I definitely don't want to face a dragon again, Cedric said while laughing. When they finally reached the Quidditch pitch, Cedric was left gaping like a fish. What they done to the pitch? Cedric cried indignantly, his eyes wide as saucers, taking in the tall hedges that were grown high into the sky. That's some 10 feet high hedges by the looks of it, Harry commented, observing the hedges sprawled out across the entirety of the Quidditch pitch, twisting and crisscrossing in every direction. Right you are, Harry, Bagman said, approaching them with Crumb, who looked like he swallowed a lemon. Took us some trouble, but Professor Sprout is no novice when it comes to her craft. So, what did you think? Seeing the look of indignation on Cedric's face, Bagman laughed and patted Cedric's shoulder like they were old buddies. Don't you worry about your Quidditch pitch, Mr. Diggory. You'll have it back in pristine condition after the task is complete, Bagman promised. Now, can any of you guess what this is? A maze, Fleur said. Excellent. You're right, Miss Delacour, Bagman crowed jovially. The third task is simple, gentleman and lady. The Triwizard Cup will be placed at the center of the maze. The first champion to touch the cup wins the tournament and all that entails. We simply have to get through this maze? Asked Fleur. Well, there'll be obstacles, Bagman said, excitedly bouncing on the balls of his feet, clapping his hands together. We'll be growing the hedges 20 feet tall, and Hagrid will be providing us with some creatures. Then there'll be spells that have to be broken, and all sort of things, you know. It'll be quite exciting. Oh, no. Not Hagrid. Cedric whispered in horror. Bagman didn't give that any mind, or maybe he chose to ignore Cedric's reaction and instead grinned like a child getting a bunch of candies. Champions who are leading in the points will get a head start on the race. Mr. Potter will go first, followed by Mr. Crumb, Miss Delacour and Mr. Diggory, said Bagman, looking at each of them with his eyes alight. Don't worry. You'll all have a fair chance to take the cup so long as you hold your wits. Should be fun, eh? Yeah, right. Harry mentally scoffed. Bagman then went ahead and gave them a cursory tour of the maze. It took them more than half an hour to traverse the maze, and they didn't even cover every pathway. It was quite a labyrinth Professor Sprout and Hagrid are cooking up. "Harry, show me the charms book you talked about," said Fleur, once the tour inside the maze came to an end. "Oh, yeah. Come," Harry said, quickly catching up on Fleur's intention. Cedric and Victor stayed behind to observe the maze while Harry led Fleur toward the castle. They ended up in a tangle of limbs in a nearby broom closet under several protective wards. I'm looking forward to this most impressive place you're taking me," Fleur said in between their kissing. "Trust me, you'll love it. XXXXXXX. There is nothing air. This is just a wall." Fleur deadpanned, looking at the dark-colored wall staring back at her. "Oh, just you wait," said Harry, who pressed a kiss on her cheek before pacing to and forth before the wall. Fleur let out an audible gasp as an ornate doorway materialized on the wall after Harry stopped his pacing. "What, how is this possible?" Fleur asked, staring at the room before her in surprise. "Welcome to the Room of Requirement, created by the world's most talented charms Mistress Rowena Ravenclaw," Harry said with a flourish. The suitably gobsmacked expression on Fleur's face validated his success in impressing her. Taking her hand, Harry led Fleur inside, where half the room looked like it was made of white marble with ornate furniture decorating the room. The other half was a sprawling grassland with a small pond. There was even a clear blue sky and a clean pond in sharp contrast to the room. The doorway disappeared once they were inside, which also caught Fleur's interest. "How is this possible?" Fleur asked, looking around the room in amazement. "The room can change into anything we want. Imagination is the limit." "Murd." Harry laughed as Fleur began throwing detection charms around the room as a true charms enthusiast should. "It won't work. Whatever Ravenclaw did to make this room is beyond the scope of simple detection charms," said Harry, noticing Fleur was getting frustrated with repeated failure to discern the secrets behind the roar. "How does EET work? I want to know everything about Z-Room," Fleur asked. "I could be persuaded to share those secrets, but first there is something you ought to do first," said Harry, pointing to the ceiling where a mistletoe was growing right on top of their heads. "Really, Harry?" Fleur looked at him with some amusement. "It's part of the Celtic tradition." Fleur shook her head before pulling Harry into a kiss that lasted for minutes. When they broke apart, both of them were out of breath. "Now tell me how to use Z-Room. Tell me everything." "That's a secret." Harry playfully grinned. "I can be persuasive," said Fleur, her hands suddenly wandering across his body while her allure flared up. While Fleur was working her magic, Harry's mind went on a tangent. Persuade. Of course. The answer was right there all along. Harry thought as an idea that could allow him to protect his blood from being used by Voldemort took root in his mind. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated as Harry Potter. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.